Welcome to the Nagus Lair with your host, the cryptozoologist. And introducing for an upcoming segment, it'll be actually done by Mary Lynn the Mermaid. But nevertheless, until then, I'm going to do this one. The history of dragons and dinosaurs and real facts that will make you wonder why many of the world's inhabitants nearly is also adamant about the belief that dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago because someone shot out a theory. As well, we will look into carbon dating and Darwinism that has an amazing poor record that's not matching the facts that keep being found constantly throughout the ages. You'll not likely find this kind of evidence readily available due to they like to bury these findings as fast as possible. And by the time this show is finished, you may at least have a small amount of the knowledge that's suppressed all over. And it's interesting how, due to there is some basic views of either we come from a god or some kind of advanced civilization sort of a thing, or we come from evolution. So, is there some kind of compromise here? Is there some more to the story? We'll go through all these kinds of interesting things, and we'll cover by all kinds of interesting facts out there, like as for instance, dragons have been reported since time began pretty well, and are reported to shoot fire. Now, we can't prove that right at this point, but we can prove that volcanoes can do such things, and can prove that. But we can prove, though, another thing interesting about volcanoes is when they date them, that they're certainly getting them awful wrong. And for an example, the lava flows that have been tested recently for carbon dating tests on them, and all other known dating methods that show being sometimes 150 million years of age or more, yet it's known 100% per fact that the lava flow just occurred like 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago or a couple hundred years ago, these kinds of stuff. So that is interesting, that obviously there's something wrong with the dating right away when you're getting it wrong that frequently like that. Other things, did dinosaurs exist in times of man, or do they still exist? We will cover ancient mentions of dinosaurs from scientists to explorers, as well as scribes to people writing in their own personal journals that all mentioning animals said not to have existed with man. And natives still to modern times reported T Rex, the Stegosaurus like creatures, to huge sauropod like dinosaurs, also many dragon like water entities in rivers and lakes and oceans across the world. Even a few ponds and streams have these stories of miniature water serpents slash Loch Ness monster sort of cryptids. To in our skies like the Kongamato or the Ropin and many others out there. And even in some cases, physical evidence such as carcasses of unknown dragon-like species to science. So let us go through the fascinating history of this kind of stuff, and let's see if this main theory here that millions of years ago a meteorite hit the Earth and conveniently only killed the dinosaurs, but nothing else pretty well, and only for some reason it just targeted them specifically, which is kind of amusing. And nevertheless, we'll go through the history of that as well. Other things we're going to cover here: has carbon dating and all known dating methods proved that species such as Tyrannosaurus rex and numerous others survived until recent times? The topics, like, be a lot of mixture into as well with the Darwinism and carbon 14 dating, history report of dragons, as well as modern sighting of dragon like creatures. For instance, on the Isle of Kirawina, this image was taken by an army topographer stationed on the island in the 1940s and is in supposed government records. It was a WikiLeaks thing, but it's very interesting, and I like it. And it is true, there is definitely reports of this sort of a creature on the specific areas here, and the natives, they call it Big Palapale, and which roughly translates to a dragon sort of an idea. And there's old Creepy himself. I would love to myself personally go on an expedition like that. I'm sure there's other animals out there to be found on that remote such an area like that. And if any place where such a creepy thing could still exist, it's possible it would be something like that. Even the most skeptic of skeptics, I'm pretty sure if we went out there and all of a sudden we found footprints and we know that nobody else has been there before, and all of a sudden you start hearing this roaring in the forest, and especially if you've seen something like that coming out of the woods, I'm pretty sure we'd be big pawing the hell out of there pretty fast. Like, because I certainly wouldn't want to hurt one of these old gruesome beasts here. I mean, there couldn't be many of them if it actually is any reality to this sort of thing. And I mean, it's not totally unfeasible in the sense that I mean, there's giant other monitor lizards, Komodo dragons, different stuff out there. I mean, it could be. It is possible that there could be some basis to this, however slim it may seem to be. But nevertheless, there's one thing that does bother me though about this photo. Um, there's some amazing things about it. You can actually see like quite good scaling detail underneath its chin and a lot of stuff, and these little micro pores and different stuff. So if it's a suit sort of thing, it would have had to been much more done more in modern times than what's claimed like taken way back then. I mean, they didn't have that kind of processes in plastics and stuff like that yet to be such detailed like that. So I find it quite interesting, and the eyes on that thing look so realistic and what have you. But one thing that does interest me about this particular thing is I have kind of one of these like identic memories with old movies and photographs and people's faces and stuff. Even if I've seen somebody decades ago, I recognize them. I might not recognize exactly where for a while or whatever, but no matter what, I recognize the face somehow. And there's something about this that I've seen this some other place and it bugs me or something very close to it. So either this might have been taken from some really old monster film and they're passing it off as this is a possibility. So if anybody's a real authority on monster film, I've watched most of them out there that I know of, but a lot of the old ones that ever was produced. But I mean, there was tons of them, and I'm sure there's some and things that I missed. So nevertheless, that's a possibility. Or B, that actually some other monster movie was kind of close to that, where a similar looking sort of thing, like, even Jurassic Park sort of idea and stuff like that. So, whatever the case, something like this, very similar, I saw in some other picture somewhere or someplace, and it just it hasn't came to me yet, but eventually will. But nevertheless, it's just an interesting sort of thing, and it's certainly interesting considering the natives still claim that they're seeing it. So let us examine the history and facts of dragons and evolution, as well as other historical traditions from the Bible and others mentioning dragons. Now, I'm not here. I know there's a lot of shows out there where all of a sudden the guy starts preaching you the Bible and all this kind of stuff. This has nothing to do with these kinds of stuff like that. I simply am a realist, and since a child, I've been researching libraries all over the place and all kinds of stuff like that. And I find these old mentions and these things, and the descriptions are always the kind of same in different places all over the place. It's just too much circumstantial stuff and people mentioning in their memoirs and all these kinds of stuff. And I consider the Bible to be very accurate when it comes to talking about cities and a lot of historic things. Nobody's ever been able to prove any of this false that it says in there. Now, you can argue up and down whether there's a God and all this kind of stuff like that, but you can't argue if the Bible says that a particular city is in a certain spot, and it is there every time they try. And there, since I've been a kid, I mean, there was literally tons of these cities that they mentioned in the Bible that they thought was fake. Now they found them, and it just keeps being accurate. So you can use the Bible and any kinds of old ancient texts that are known to be at least fairly accurate, sort of an idea here. But by even the most critical of people would admit that you know what I mean. There's a lot of accuracies when it comes to mentioning of cities and things like the kinds of stuff like that. So these things, when you see this and so much and so much and so much of it, and the other thing that you're provided is just in the imagination of a theory that you think something could be millions of years old, but you can't really prove that, and you think that a meteorite hit the earth and killed conveniently all the dinosaurs but left all the other animals to live on. I mean, that's very unbelievable. It really is. I'm surprised so many people go for these kinds of stuff. The reality is much more logical. There's literally thousands of references you can find through literature and history all over the place of them mentioning what I've always believed since a kid, because there's so many different times they change these theories and stuff like that. I simply believe that humans hunted them out. And there may have been some cataclysms in the past that did wipe out numerous kinds of them and stuff, but it certainly doesn't prove that none of them couldn't have survived to more modern times. It certainly doesn't prove that dragons didn't exist or any of these kinds of stuff, because the historical records are there. There's all kinds of references, so much so that even the most skeptical people have to admit that, you know what I mean. Obviously, there's more to it than what meets the eye. So we'll cover all kinds of interesting things. And so first, we're going to start off with just the basics here of evolution. Now, like I said, me personally, I'm not a believer in this sort of a thing at all. But again, I'm not here to preach you religious views or any of these other sorts of stuff. I simply uh, the things that they say are not matching up with what I see all over the place. So it just the two can't. You know what I mean? Meet with each other at all here. So, as a for instance, now according to evolution, we came from the coelacanth fish that walked up onto the land from the shallow seas and went up and stuff like that. Usually, they're actually now Charles Darwin, when he made this up, he did not realize at the time that this fish was actually still alive. And this lady, Courtney Latimer, she back in 1938, I think, was off the coast of South Africa. And she actually found this fish. This native fisherman had caught in one, and she right away recognized it from the fossil record. So she got it all together, got it packed in ice and salt and this sort of stuff, and shipped it off. And here it shocked the scientific world, because here this fish was supposed to have been died out like 65 million years ago, or 30 some million to 80 million, depending on which authority you listen to, but never less than that sort of range of mass millions of years ago. So now his theory was is that this coelacanth fish had evolved from other earlier life forms, and you know what I mean. It climbs up the chain to eventually head. Then finally, it crawled up onto land and started becoming the land animals. Interestingly, this fish does has been filmed many times underwater. People have been very close to it, touched it, all kinds of stuff like that. Anglers still continue to catch them occasionally, and they're actually spread out a lot more than what people thought they were originally. But nevertheless, um, they never was have they ever been spotted doing this sort of thing. Now, other species which are also supposed to have been around since the time of the dinosaurs do actually do that kind of behavior, like lungfish, snakeheads, a walking catfish, eels, this sorts of stuff. And the thing is that they've never changed either since the beginning. They've been doing that sort of behavior, of course, because they evolved that kind of behavior quite quickly. This particular species of fish in those areas, simply because a lot of them there would be variance in drought and stuff like that, where very dry climates and periods where they may need to get a water, to water out of there and not actually stay in a place like that. So over time, they realized that because they could breathe air, there's many species that can do this. Carp can do this, different ones. They can come up and suck up air. Obviously, the fish probably over time, it wouldn't be that hard to believe that, it would learn to move its pectoral fins and kind of just and scatter along like that, and then make it to a new pond, and this sort of behavior would start being built into particular species that would have these kinds of issues. Or they do like some of them do, where they'll bury way underneath in the mud, deep, 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 and then when the spring rains and the stuff come again, then they'll come up and hatch and have their babies and all that kind of stuff. So there's different ways to deal with it, but his imagination of the reason why they had these giant fins is so that they were going to start to walk, is obviously just complete hogwash. In fact, there's all kinds of species of fish that have extremely large pectoral fins that have nothing to do with walking on the bottom or any of these kinds of stuff like that. There's even unusual species that are endemic only to certain bodies of water, like in Great Bear Lake, they have a fish called a butterfly laker. It's exactly the same as any other lake trout out there. Except in this particular lake, that the bulb where they get these much huge, much larger pectoral fins on them, and so in this specific environment, they need this sort of thing that helps them to hunt and stabilize and different things that it may actually do. Nobody's been able to prove exactly the reason why they have this, but a lot of theories are out there. But basically, it's something to in that particular lake to help it to either maneuver from different depths or stay at different depths easier, or whatever it may be, or to hunt, or whatever the possibility. But nevertheless, there's all kinds of variances like this all over the place. So if he had known this originally, I'm sure he probably would have tried some other method, because obviously it wouldn't make any sense when they're actually still alive and they're claimed to be extinct for mass millions of years, and they're the fish that's claimed to turn into us eventually, yet they still look exactly the same as they did then, supposedly, if the world is actually this massive millions of years of age. The origin of species was introduced by Darwin and a Mr. Wallace. They don't mention him much, but he actually was credited with, actually a lot of this part of this sort of theoretical stuff that they had came up with, and has convinced many people across the world that we came from the coelacanth and eventually evolved into us. Now, interestingly, there's many living fossils that have been found over the decades, and now scientists have a new theory to fight these living fossils by saying they really are not living fossils and just look similar to a fossil record species, but not really the same. Although they're identical, and if you put each one into and was able to make a fossil out of it, you would see the exact same thing, right? But nevertheless, this is what they came up with this particular week or hour to combat these kinds of stuff, because one of their excuses even for Sasquatch or stuff like that is it's impossible. We would have found them in the fossil record and stuff like that, but there's all kinds of species that they found where there's been no known fossil variants since the last time supposedly found in a layer that's 100 million years old, yet they're still alive to this day. So obviously there's problems with these kinds of theories when constantly this kinds of stuff you can't argue with physical sort of evidence, and again, if you believe that actually somehow these fish re-evolved and came back into themselves and they went extinct, but a species that looks identical to them, they're just living ones, they evolved into this again, sort of thing. Would that not go against evolution again? That, I mean, like, here you're claiming it branches off and they keep improving, yet you're now re-evolving into the same thing that you were before. Why did you bother going extinct? You weren't good enough in the first place. Why would you make the same replica again? Yeah, there's all these kinds of stuff that they come up with, but I mean, there's no fossil records anywhere of any particular, like, a partial part of this, like where you know what I mean, a chimp is partially turning into a man, or any of this kinds of stuff. You cannot prove any of those. There's none available any place, and that's why, is because it actually has probably never occurred. However, you can say though that evolution is realistic in the sense that if you left a bird on an island, and the island had a different terrain than what it was used to previously, but was somehow able to hold a niche there and survive, and would start eating different kinds of food available there and different stuff like that. It's very feasible that maybe over time it would get smaller or larger, its wings would get bigger, its wings would color change, different things like that, and eventually become almost kind of like a new kind of a species here. Like those kinds of things is totally feasible, and for sure exist. However, to take millions of years to do that, that's very unlikely. And since I've been a kid, I mean, they've changed these theories constantly. It's mind-boggling how many times since pretty well I've been around. I mean, first they were very slow-witted, dumb creatures that could barely move until they got tons of sun. Then some of them were only like that, but others were faster. Now they keep continuing, and every time a new group that was to overthrow their professor's last theory, now now they got it. They were faster than lightning, and there was this and that, and now they're birds, and next week it's going to be Bigfoot and this kinds of stuff, right? So it's very interesting, and I mean, the idea that these a T Rex was actually related to this duck here. Could you imagine their old T Rex quacking up a storm? So it's interesting, but I mean, it's just the theory of the day here again. But they teach these things, in fact, in the classes, but in reality, they all are theories and could never be proved. Really, like if you brought them into a court of law session or something like that sort of idea. Now, there you can see the typical, you're turning from Fred the chimp here, and ooh, 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 and then you change up, and then eventually you become man, and conveniently, of course, all these creatures are still here as well. And lots of things look like each other. Like, I mean, if you talk to scientists and stuff like that, if you said, well, is a bat a bird? Of course, they're going to say, no, no, they're different variant species, yet they look very similar. I mean, they have the same kind of habits in some way. They're both going to fly around. Birds make a chirping kinds of sounds. Bats make a squeaking. Bats can see better in the darkness and stuff like that, and actually can see quite well. A lot of people think that they're blind, but no, it's easier for them to use the sonar and stuff like that. But they actually don't have as bad of eyesight as what a lot of people think. But nevertheless, it's two different things here. Where they may have similar kinds of things, and yes, they remind one of each other, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're really the same. These kinds of things, there's a lot of problems with this kind of stuff. Uh, but the main thing is never there's been any fossils of these intermediate sort of stuff, like where Fred the chimp is turning into Barney the gorilla. Yeah, yeah, you know what I mean, and this kind of stuff like that. That they don't have these things throughout it. So I mean, if there actually was any validity to it, for sure, by all this time, at least one fossil would have been found showing these kinds of stuff, and it just doesn't, never has occurred yet. And probably never will, because, but it certainly, you could prove that evolution is accurate in the sense that things can either get smaller or bigger to fit their surroundings, and may change colorations and different stuff like that. Now, that's another poor theory about the evolution thing that isn't makes any common sense at all. The idea is that you're supposed to keep by selective natural selection, that you're going to become stronger, greater, you're going to pick the best parts and all this kind of stuff, and eventually evolve into these kinds of different things. But in reality, I mean, if you look through old ancient history and all kinds of stuff like that, as for instance, there's been mention of giants since pretty well time began and stuff like that. So, I mean, if we were evolving into these bigger, tougher, greater species and stuff like that, you would think it would be the opposite way, that in ancient times it only would have been just like miniature people, and then eventually, you know what I mean, we're going to have giants in more modern times of today and stuff like that, because it would take ages for us to start becoming these super Hercules sort of stuff, and that doesn't occur either. I mean, there's variances all the time. One generation you could have way big, they're all super tall. Next one, a lot of people think that they're big and tall nowadays much more than in the past. Doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, I'm going to show you something coming up here that will blow your mind. If authentic, which all so far resources or any sources I can find about this thing is authentic. It's actually was taken from Japanese archives films. And when you get a size a load of this big boy here, he will make any wrestler you've ever seen, any person you've ever seen, Robert Wadlow. He's going to make, Goliath look like a munchkin. All of these are going to would quake in their boots against Big Kwong that you're going to be seeing there soon. So, yeah, I can't wait to show you this character, but I've seen, I've watched the film many times. If it's some fake that this guy somehow really he absolutely a genius stuff, great stuff. You can see the old cuttings in the film. This was filmed in a very early times of film, and apparently this big goon of a guy they would bring him out on special occasions and stuff like that. So. All I can say is that there's people riding in front of him and behind him, and they're on a horse, and they're not even up barely around Big Boy's waist here. So I mean, this guy. When you see him, anyways, that's all I can say is I've changed my mind. I always said there was not a human being on Earth that could fit in the Patterson film, but sorry, big old Quan could there. There would be one guy that definitely could actually play this part, and May Way, I have no idea, but it'd be pretty scary. And but anyways, we'll show him after there. But something you're not going to believe. But very interesting. If it is proved authentic, I mean, this will actually verify all these ancient stories of people claiming in China, even up until modern near times, there was still people 15 feet tall and stuff like that. And this guy's right in this kind of, range that people would believe would be totally impossible. So stay tuned for that. Now, next part of the evolution theory's dating of objects is it accurate? Carbon 14 is a dating method used to determine age by the organic material and using the properties of radiocarbon. The theory is that the age can be measured due to breakdown is known to occur so much within a time frame. The problem is that no one can prove or could know what will happen to material after so-called millions of years. After a particular time, it seems that the method cannot be considered remotely accurate due to there is no proof that the breakdown continues at that same rate and only a guess. Now, it is interesting. And here's some interesting facts, and each one shows that this theory has many holes in it. Stalagmites. Now, I'm sure you've been taught this in schools. Stalagmites take millions of years to grow and all this kind of stuff. But now, as a for instance, Abe Lincoln statue, okay? All the records are there when they built it. There was no such a thing there. There was no stalagmite there. There was no nothing. They built this statue, the beautiful old Abe Lincoln statue. I've seen it myself. And then all of a sudden, over these decades now, a big stalagmite grows underneath it, okay? When they test it, it thinks it's millions of years old, yet obviously this thing is only decades old. And again, how could there be such a variance here when you're scientifically telling people it takes millions of years to grow something, yet within our own eyes and our own modern time, we can conclusively prove that a stalagmite grew underneath, okay, the Abe Lincoln's statue and is tested at millions of years old. Yet this thing, grew. It only took decades to do this. So I mean, again, there seems to be some big problems here, right? There's tons of these. Now people like myself that like challenging this sort of theory because I mean, again, it's just a theory. There's actually, again, no actually real facts here where you could conclusively hold this in your hand, prove it to a broad base of people. There's always going to be some people that will deny the truth and stuff like that. But I mean, to actually prove it, where you could prove that exactly these things occurred back in those times and stuff like that, which you couldn't do unless you had a time machine and stuff like that. So this will always be theory, but it is sure accepted by a lot. Now, the father of this theory, Dr. Libby, presumed that carbon-14 ratio was constant, and he based this on the belief that the world was millions of years old. So right away, because he made an assumption, he starts building a theory on an assumption, and then is sure you could make something match up on the imagination that something's this and that. You could finally make a mathematical sort of formula that would maybe make sense and could fit into stuff. However, that certainly wouldn't again prove it anything that it's millions of years old. Again, it's just a presumption. And The danger with this theory is it's not constant carbon 14. He even noted that in his works that the atmosphere did not appear to be in equilibrium, which bothered him, but he still chose to continue even though he could see there would be huge inaccuracies in his theory and was based just on that presumption. Here are some examples of literally thousands of examples showing how wrong these states can be. Diamonds are said to be millions to billions of years old, yet testing of many samples show they have carbon 14, which then, according to their own theories of half life, would then give them thousands, not millions of years old, which is what they date at often when tested. They have been sampled at all layers of strata claimed to be millions or billions of years in age, and all contain carbon 14 when tested, and are showing they are only thousands of years old, not millions. If the rate of decay is constant, especially without a knowledge of the exact ratio of C12 to C14 in sample tested, the dating method will be hugely in question. Now, traditional carbon 14C testing assumes that equilibrium is in the rate of a formation and that the rate of decay tests show in many previous and recent studies carbon 14C is forming faster than the observed decaying rate of samples. This makes it likely, if anything, that the Earth is younger, not older, according to most experts. Carbon dating can only be known accurate when you know the date of the object exactly. And in all cases, they never get it down to the year, and most times they're off by thousands to millions of years. Here is an interesting find sent to major laboratories around the world, not telling them that their real age of the object. Now, you'll be astonished again how inaccurate they are, often ranging in ages of 150 million years difference with numerous types of different dating tests with all the modern stuff here. So, I mean, there's definitely problems here. Now, if you call that accurate science and you're following the methods and basing your method on presumptions that things are millions of years old due to your following of the Darwinism theory, you then constantly will make mistakes and the whole process can be little accepted. The only reason it is that people that follow this choose to ignore the facts and in reality, except in cases where a proven date of the object is known, the accuracy cannot be known, and the mixing science with theory makes bad medicine, in my opinion. And I mean, lots of people feel this way. It has nothing even to do with the religious aspect for a lot of people. It's just simply isn't matching the facts that are being found out there. Also, other dating methods, the same thing, give off millions of years dates, yet object is known to be only thousands of years old. They all presume that the decay rate is constant and that the rate thousands and millions of years ago was the same as it was today. Therefore, these methods can only at best be a theory answer due to under the microscope it cannot be proved except when the exact age of the object is indisputable, and most of the time again they get this wrong and can have variances of millions of years. Carbon 14 dating can be considered at least sometimes accurate within thousands of years testings of known items of age. However, as of for instance a 500-year-old board from a church was sent to numerous testings and all came out with ages of 150,000 to 150 million years of age. A microchip found recently in Russia after numerous tests showed all dating methods that they know of that was used upon this thing kept showing it to be 200 and 250 million years of age. This shows that either both scientists and creationists are both wrong if all known dating methods are correct that have been done on this so-called microchip. This would then mean that a man would have had to been with dinosaur, or that aliens made the microchip, or carbon dating and other methods are wrong. I mean, you can't say that your methods are accurate, yet you use all the methods you use. Here, a microchip's 250 million years of age. That would show then that humans would have been around along the same time as dinosaurs and stuff like that. So either way, here, obviously there's some. Now, in recent times, many dinosaur bones are dating from 1,000 to near 30,000 years old, and all showing they must have lived beside man. Some have found DNA in tissue. Now, if you really think that tissue could survive for millions of years and DNA, I mean, seriously, it is laughable that such a thing could occur. Bacteria, earthquakes, floods, storms, etc., etc., Many other changes in climate over so-called millions of years would surely dissolve and obliterate any evidence of soft tissue. For sure, it would have dried out or been eaten by natural bacteria, etc., etc., etc. I mean, the list is on and on here. I mean, it's not believable in any way, shape, or form on this planet. So, I mean, you're going to have to stop fighting for a theory that's starting to not really make much sense, you know. However, in thousands of years old and quickly buried by a flood like event, then that would make sense. And that's why you would find huge piles of animals that are often found in mass graves, and some even still eating food and then buried alive, indicating they had little warning. When a giant flood like tidal wave is coming at you or something like that and buries an island or some landmass or whatever like that would be very feasible. And then so it would bury, toss, and turn all kinds of stuff. People, animals, all kinds of stuff would be mixed in different kinds of layers and things like that. And by the time that maybe when this flood actually occurred, you know what I mean? There's all kinds of possibilities here why some of these stuff would occur that actually would make much more sense if some kind of cataclysmic sort of a thing caused the destruction of many species at that particular time, but obviously not all of them. So yeah, there's all these kinds of theories, but I mean, bottom line is that your own dating methods here keep stating that, and you're finding cartilage and different things inside of dinosaur bones. You got to start to think in your mind, really, do you really believe that this kind of material, blood and stuff like that, could last for massive hundreds of millions of years and what have you? I mean, seriously. Now, this lady here is one of my heroes and one of the sexiest scientists there. She's a mature, very bright, intelligent lady. So that's the new sexy out there. She's got brains, inner and outer beauty equals triangular force that can achieve greatness and not to be reckoned with. Yeah, and she stood her ground even though they fired her over and stuff like that. All of the tests that they use, they brought in every kind of skeptic to looking at it and all kinds of stuff like that. Her methods were sound, everything sound. And since then, there's been all kinds of people like her. Same thing where they keep finding these dinosaur bones that are dating very early ages, totally within the realm of man and this sorts of stuff like that. So obviously, there is some severe problems. But now, also, I'd have to give out a shout out to probably about the most cutest scientist out there in the entire world. But not only that, she totally astounds me, but I love it because I believe in such things like since I was a child. I always go against the grade, so if all the professionals are saying, flip underneath a dock, I'll flip underneath in caves, whatever it may be. I like to do different than the rest and stuff like that. And I've discovered that fish species will do amazing stuff that is not recorded in any literature out there. You'll find them in places that they're not supposed to live in and all kinds of stuff because I was willing to hunt in areas and locations and places where people claim that they don't exist and do all kinds of different patterns and techniques and different things. And I love hunting giants. That's what my interest is in hunting giant fish since a child. And that's what I mostly spend my time doing and these kinds of stuff. And so I always beat odds here all the time by catching fish species in places where they're not supposed to be and at different times of day when the experts claim that they won't feed and all these kinds of stuff, that is out there. So I like to challenge a lot of beliefs because the fact is that the people that are writing these things can only write about what their own experience. So if a guy is only fishing on a few lakes in the planet or whatever, I mean, not every person has had time to go to thousands of lakes and do experiments like this kinds of stuff. A vast majority of these writers, I mean, they may may have only visited dozens of lakes in their life or whatever. So they're basing their beliefs on because of a broad spectrum of maybe fishing so many kinds of bodies of water that are similar and the same kind of thing happens. They think that this is the way that it's got to be. But I mean, there could be massive variances to these things in any body of water at any time. I mean, you'll find all kinds of literature. Like when I was young, they would claim all the time that bass wouldn't bite in cold water. And I mean, since I'd be at 4 years of age casting along the banks here in freezing November, there'd be ice along the shores and stuff like that. And I'd just drag stuff along the bottom and I'd pick up these great big old smallmouth. I've been doing that forever since and stuff like that, largemouth bass. I'd catch some ice fishing and things like that. Yet all these experts claim that they wouldn't bite in cold water and stuff like that. So this shark whisperer lady is right up my alley. I love stuff like this. And what she's figured out, from what I can understand, is that basically uh, I've known a lot of this kind of stuff since I was a little kid. Yet, sharks can they can sense like the tiniest little impulses and stuff inside of you, movements, thrashing. They can smell blood in parts per billions and stuff like that. So if you drop one little, like let's say you poured 1 gallon of blood, in maybe like 2 or 3 billion gallons of water, they could actually still smell that. So could you imagine how diluted that would be? So they're incredible creatures and stuff like that. And because this lady approaches them in a certain way and is able, for them, the fish is able to read her and then realize that she's not backing down. She's not trying to actually harm it either. And it's not in a feeding frenzy or stuff like that. I mean, you could only get away with this so much, I'd imagine. Under the wrong circumstances, you still could get harmed. But I have seen there's been a few other people that have done such things. I one time grabbed a 14-foot nurse shark in Florida. It was a real monster as swam by, and I got in big trouble and yelled at for doing such a thing. But nevertheless, that's what I did. And I'm quite fascinated by sharks myself and things like that. But this shark whisper lady, astounding nerve to be able to actually grab onto the dorsal fin of a great white shark and go for a swim with them. It's her work is groundbreaking and quite a genius stuff here. So I love people that are challenging this stuff, but actually finding physical, actual things that you can prove. I mean, nobody can argue that this lady can swim with great white sharks because that's exactly what that she does. And exactly the same thing here with Dr. Mary Schweitzer and stuff like that. These ladies, they stuck by their guns. They show you the evidence and stuff like that. But because the old dragons out there don't want to hear this kind of stuff because it's going against the standard beliefs, then you always run across these kinds of problems. So it's quite interesting how it all works. So but now next we're going to go to the history of dragons. Now, no creature across the globe of a so-called mythical variety besides the unicorn is known all across the world and revered and still believed in by many. In fact, a secret order since the 12th century was formed to protect real dragons. Sadly, you have to be an aristocrat to join them. I wonder if, being a direct descendant of a king, if they would let me slip in, but nevertheless, I would love to go to one of their meetings. I'm sure it would be extremely entertaining, to say the least, and get some great historical stories from them and stuff like that, whoever this gang may be. But nevertheless, apparently they're an actual real group that exists out there somewhere in this planet, so I'd love to meet them someday. But anyways, I love the unusual and the strange, so any group that is into protecting mythical or non-mythical creatures, I am all for, as well as who is to say that they are or were mythical, whether they are or not, right? So, I mean, that's only a supposition. So, let us travel through history back to ages and ago and listen to accounts of everyone from emperors to peasants, as well as kings to scribes, missionaries, historians, traders, emperors, doctors, priests, scientists, reverends, monks, pharmacists, and many more that witnessed dragons to dinosaurian like creatures alive. Here, this dragon attacking a rider in the ancient wall artwork. Notice the detail matches some dinosaur species. One wonders why one would spend ages to make such skilled details of an imaginary creature. The cost involved even then would have been substantial. However, if the story was real and the tribute is really of killing this dragon, then that would make sense. Like in this depiction, that's exactly what they claimed. It was a tribute for this dragon being killed. So, it makes one wonder. I mean, if you were a typical king guy or whatever, why would you want to spend like a fortune to have this imaginary thing in your mind to put up in your wall to celebrate what, when all the inhabitants in your kingdom obviously know it's not real because nobody believes in them, sort of idea. It doesn't make any sense, but it would make sense again if they actually were basing it on some kind of real creature. And then of course you would want to. People have been doing that since ancient times. They put up monuments to resurrect for everybody from Caesar to people. Some kind of monster. Ancient cultures would worship some kind of statue of some sort that quite often does look like some dinosaurian figures, and it could be that's where they got this habit from, seeing this great a huge creature that would be scary looking, that they might give it like some godlike kind of idea in their mind and start worshiping it, sort of idea. So and there's all kinds of proof of this kinds of stuff as well throughout history. But now, as well as Naga dragon sightings and records of either live captured ones or killed ones found dead or witnessed, covering from earliest times to today, as well as some evidence of giants of different species from human to fish. Now, scientists often will purposely mislabel creatures due to the truthful answer, then will cause them loss of job, etc., like what had happened to Mary Schweitzer there. Due to the find does not agree with evolution. As in this case of the beast found, they actually had enough audacity to claim that this was everything from a basking shark to a whale until giving up. Now, if you know anything about basking sharks, whales, squid species, pinnipeds, all this kinds of stuff, I guarantee you anybody that actually knows anything about them right away is going to tell you, no, that I agree with you. There is no species that I know of that would match what I'm looking at here in this picture. Now, two professors actually looked at this, and they were convinced that it was some kind of dinosaurian sort of a thing like that. And any skeptic, I mean, seriously, I love any person to really, you can give any kind of a idea you want, but there's all kinds of stuff in here you can clearly see. This thing definitely has big, sharp, serrated sort of looking teeth. You can see it right in the front. It's very plesiosaur kind of looking sort of an idea here. There's no blowhole on it. The eyes are positioned in totally different places than typically a whale would be or anything like that. It's certainly not in any bad decay enough here that you can clearly see it's not eaten away like what the Japanese beast was that they found, that everybody argues whether it was a plesiosaur or a basking shark or this kinds of stuff. In that case, they may have some feasible explanation there to a certain degree. I'd have to actually look at the skin and the stuff like that, and look and compare it to knowing basking sharks and stuff like that to prove one way or the other of that. Some people claim they've already done this, but others claim no, this isn't the case. So I mean, it's a battle over that particular one. But in this case, 100%, this isn't eaten away enough yet. And these were intelligent professor people, stuff like that. You can clearly see, I mean, the jaw and everything is so very different. It's 100% dinosaurian sort of a looking thing here. I mean, it couldn't be a blob of whale blubber or any of these kinds of stuff like that. And I mean, so seriously, this was one that should have been described by science. and this should be in real awe in a museum somewhere, because whatever it was, it was definitely some kind of a dinosaurian sort of living representative in our modern times like that. What we're also going to later cover about the fiery phoenix, known as the bird of immortality to the dragon, and all of these animals by most are considered a myth. However, not all, and I'm one of them rare group that has not been brainwashed 100% and seeker of the real truth, whether it's popular or not. Now, myself and many others see that there is much more to the story. The fact is that some dinosaurs, aka land dragons, survived until near modern times, and possibly a few still do. And water negas still live in the highest of likelihood, and at least some bodies of water around the world. And I think I have an answer for the riddle of the phoenix. I will cover this later. So let us start off with the history of the dragon and dinosaur-like sightings and carcasses found. And yeah, hopefully by the end of it, this is just a smidgen of the evidence available out to you there. But I mean, it really is so much of it so that even the most skeptical person, I mean, you can't keep saying these, paintings must have been a stain by accident or this kind of stuff. Eventually, you got to start seeing that. I mean, there's just too much of this evidence to just push underneath the carpet. Now, here is a list of some of the countries across the globe that have had these sightings and just some of the names in their culture for these terrible lizards. Africa, the motherland, the Drac Mokele Mbembe living dinosaur, and many others, but I'm going to cover a bit about them later on because that's where many of the living dinosaurs of today are still reported. The Bhutan is called the Drak, basically meaning the thunder dragon. Okay, China, the Long Koi, the Naga Mogui, and many others. Russia, the Naga, Zmei, and many others. Often Russian dragons, for some odd reason, have three heads. Iceland, Dreki, dragon, worm, Lindorm, the Hassa dragon, Holland, the Karajan, India, Alberta, Naga Mayan, the Mayan culture, the Pakahangba, Latin, is draken, meaning huge serpent dragon. Now, interesting photos like this makes one wonder what great beasts live in our waters. Authenticity of this one or origin of this photo is unknown. However, it does remind me of a tale that in the First World War, some German sub that had actually shot it and hit by accident some kind of sea monster and went flying up in the air. So whether this is from some old horror movie or what have you, I don't really know. But it, if it was done ages ago, it was extremely well done because I mean there's some really good stuff in here. So it's interesting. Anyways, I'd like to know more about it. I can't. I'm kind of on the fence of it because it's almost too good looking to me. But nevertheless, if it is shown to be authentic and they actually, especially if they had the original negative for this thing, that would be an extraordinary find there because I mean certainly if this is authentic, it's definitely no known species on Earth. That's 100% for sure. Now, Greece, it's the draken, English, drake, dragon, serpent, worm. Many other names too, but that's your basic ones here. In Persia, the Dehag, South America, Quetzalcoatl, Europe, too many to mention them all, but here are the most mentioned names: the Nuker, Wyvern, Drake, Dragon, Lindworm. Lindworm, Grendel, specific names like in France, the Peluda, the Garguay, North American dragon, drake, serpent, Neataka, also native words such as Natak, referred to a dragon-like beast. Interestingly, the natives living around in Kelowna call Ogopogo a similar name and meaning Nayataka. So it's interesting, a similar sort of a meaning here in many cultures, I guess. But the problem is natives' cultures referred to dragons as more as serpents and mix in water and flying serpents. So most authorities think that native cultures do not have dragons in their tails, but this is not the case. They're clearly the same sort of thing here. It's just simply that they call them serpents and stuff like that, but I mean it's basically the same kind of idea here, quite clearly. And In fact, there's as well an older cave painting clearly shows a dragon-like creature that at the time names existed probably for them likely, but were extinct way before any eras of most likely native recollection of today's times, and maybe just passed on as a story or something like that. But at one time, there definitely was some kind of basis to these sorts of stuff. Now, however, still many water-type dragon-like creatures have local names depending on tribe and still seen in modern times, and one such as the Octena, which is a creature with horns and fire eyes, sounds dragon like, as well as many others, including one thought to be several thousand plus years old, depicting a dragon shooting fire out of its mouth. By the way, this is not an impossible behavior. A Bombardier beetle actually can do a very similar thing. They spray out this kind of a gas that will incinerate the creature, you know. So, as well as I suspect, it was actually more of like a glowing luminescent, maybe bacteria of some sort, similar to like Komodo dragons have this deadly bacteria, but this would be a different kind of a glow, and there is such thing as glowing bacteria and stuff like that, so it's quite feasible. And a lot of the accounts, they say the smoke like breath is coming out because it's breathing, and the bacteria is luminescent. It's just coming out, and it would make that kind of a smoky, creepy looking sort of lighty sort of effect to it. You know, so it is feasible. The word dragon for the use of this specific word, the earliest mention I can find is from Old French word dragon, from Latin word meaning Draco, meaning the great serpent. Now, here is interesting history of the sightings and recordings of Nagan terrestrial dragons. Depending on authority, for sure, the Bible is at least one of the oldest books. Now, in the Bible, there is clear mentions of dragons, occurs numerous times, including the mention of a flying fiery serpent, aka dragon. Interestingly, the original meaning has been tampered with by modern Christians, which I found just kind of disgraceful to me. I don't see why you people are changing the meaning, the true meaning of what it was supposed to mean at the time, why you're changing it just because you think that some people of today are going to read it and not believe in the Bible because they can't believe that such a thing as a dragon existed. You know, you're not supposed to change it just for these kinds of reasons. I mean, that's very false, and putting in words like alligator and these other stuff that was not the original meaning and nothing to do with it at all. It's kind of like it's not right. So I hopefully that somebody out there is still actually printing an accurate Bible, not changing meanings here and stuff like that. That's a very bad, disgraceful habit. And whatever people are doing this and changing the names of known creatures, you need to use the original translations, exactly what they were, and that's exactly what they meant. They meant dragon, not this kind of stuff that you're proposing and these more modern ones and stuff like that. Now, it's very interesting, like especially one particular one, the sightings of the mentionings in the Bible of the mighty Leviathan. Sounds very identical to several creatures that were actually found in modern times. One in the 1920s, and another one that I was so excited, boy, when I was a younger fellow. I saw this in our paper when it came out, and then there was some kind of news media thing about it, and these kinds of stuff like that. And 7 groups of scientists in 1969 studied for weeks this monster, and all calling it a dinosaur or dinosaur-like or unknown species. Now, finally, the last team, because what they kept doing is every time the first scientific team came back and said, no, this really is some kind of living dinosaur here and stuff like that. Oh, no, it can't be. Get back there. We'll send a new team. Oh, they said the same thing. Oh, it can't be. And so after eventually now this thing's eaten away to no tomorrow here and is reeking on the beach for weeks on end, right? Then finally these last guys passed it off and said it was a whale, which interestingly they didn't mention that species has no horn of any sort, and that conveniently this species had a 1-ton horn on it. So, I mean, obviously it couldn't be the same species right away. But not only that, I mean, the shape is completely different. Any person that believes this was a whale probably believes in Peter Pan and the Tooth Fairy. Because seriously, I don't see how any person could really claim that. Uh, if you look at these, a lot of interesting things about this creature, and this is a terrible sort of more of a drawing sort of a thing of it, but you can find some clear online, and you can go look it over and very carefully look over. You'll notice some amazing things. The creature's eyeball, if you done some measurements, if you're a mathematical person, you can clearly put it down along about this guy's chest and make about the same sort of size of what it would have been. And it's bigger than what is being shown here on the bottom, okay? That eyeball is much larger than the largest known creature on Earth, and that's the Anarchiteuthis duck species, where they are known to have the largest eyes on Earth. Okay, yet this creature obviously has even a larger eye than that. I mean, so that's one thing. Obviously, this is not a squid. Now, when you go look at clear photos of this, you'll quite clearly see a big tongue coming out there. This thing's got teeth and it's got this amazing scaling all in its face. Totally different from any whale. Whales don't have that kind of a scaling patterns or anything like that. It's got hair growing down its back. And then, interestingly, just at the beginning of its neck is coming down, and this is where it was chopped off at this point for convenience to move and get rid of it. But you can see these giant interlocking scales, and that's exactly like how they describe the Leviathan. Spears harm it and all this kinds of stuff. It has great interlocking scales that nothing can get through, exactly as the kinds of descriptions and stuff, very similar to that. And this kind of creature here may have been the basis of considering how accurate the Bible is with their cities and all this kinds of stuff that we can prove. I certainly don't see any reason to doubt it when it's making these kind of statements like that a dragon existed, that some kind of fiery serpent-like thing did exist in biblical times. That matches where I'm going to show you all kinds of more stuff showing that obviously that this is the case, that people were seeing these kinds of stuff. But this particular one, and since another one exactly was described exactly around the same off of the Gulf of Florenza back in the 1920s, obviously this creature, especially why would you believe the last scientific group and think that the previous, all those other different groups were wrong? I mean, seriously, it definitely wasn't a whale. It was an unknown species to science. It's kind of some kind of like sea king sort of, like Oceanus Rigo, something like that. It's some amazing throwback of whatever of early times for sure. Definitely to me, another example of a possible living dinosaur. But whatever it was, whether it's a more modern sort of species or who's ever right, whether the Earth is millions of years old or not, or any of that, no matter what, this creepy, gruesome monster does actually, at least did exist in our, in the 1900s at least, and may still possibly, considering two of them showed up in their separation of parts of quite a few decades, it could be that maybe the odd one dies or whatever. It was interesting too that both of them, a part of their tail was missing. Now, did something else, a bigger specimen of their own kind, attack one of them and injure it, and then they just happen to die in a battle or something like that? Who knows? But whatever this amazing creature was, it was definitely not any whale on Earth, not any seal, not any known fish, not anything on Earth could match what this thing was. So case closed for me for that. No matter what anybody says, 100% guaranteed. I know my things about this kinds of stuff, and any scientist that proposes any ridiculous stuff of squid, octopus, all this kind of hoogly boogly, I mean, seriously, it's laughable. And any person who actually knows marine biology could really, combat what you would be saying. It's just not logical. So they definitely, in this case for sure, was an unknown species of science, as well as that previous one. Here's a third one, the same thing. Here's some other carcasses that for sure are likely examples of dinosaurs, or at the very least unknown species to science. Two professors investigated this beast. It was found dead in 1934, and both said it was no whale or fish and unknown to science. So here you're going to call two professors a liar. Of course, they'll just disaccount it because it might bother with the evolution theory again. So, but again, you can clearly see this is very like a plesiosaurian sort of a looking thing here. It's not eaten away enough yet, where the skin's all eaten away. You can clearly see its mouth is very unusual. It doesn't have a huge serpentine long of a neck as some, so it may be actually some kind of even unknown pinniped-like species where they have a longer neck. It's possible. It's also interestingly matches its tail matches a couple of monster films and some photographs and eyewitness accounts over the ages of a three sort of split tail like creature like this, similar. So that's another interesting thing. Here's another one that's a fascinating one. Boy, I'd love to hook that on a rod and reel, I'll tell you, but that'd be a battle of the century. But old Big Kahuna here. This thing here, I mean, if you see the size of this, it's an absolute monster of a specimen. And it may have been like an unknown to science because it seems to be extremely on the large end of what the largest devilfish ever was recorded, as well as the color is not consistent. This one's almost like an albino sort of thing. So either it may have been some unknown species of a devil slash ray sort of a species, unknown to science, or an incredibly huge specimen of devilfish, much larger than typically accepted here, and an albino specimen. So that was quite the amazing find there, anyways. And you can see the size of that mother. That must have been something else, and the crane here in the background trying to lift the thing. So quite extraordinary. But here he is. Here is the guy I was pretty excited about here when I seen this film. Look at the size of that. This is big boy, Big Kwong here. And I don't think you'd want to be peeping off Big Kwong. It's just absolutely astounding here. The first thing I was thinking about is, could you imagine Vince, the McMahons there? I'm sure they would love to get their paws on this fellow here. Poor old Triple H there, the poor Undertaker, having to wrestle Big Kwong here. I think those boys, even the legendary Undertaker, might be in a bit of trouble with Kwong here. But nevertheless, I'd still vote for the Undertaker anyway. But fantastic here. Here's old Kwong there. And when I first saw this, I just could not believe it. I just kept replaying the film. It looks authentic. It looks very old. It's got all the grainy scratches in it. Genius stuff if it's a fake. Apparently it was found by some director or something, and he actually is going to use this in some kind of thing he's going to do. And it was found in these older Japanese archives in very early films. And apparently they'd invite this monster to come out to do a parade occasionally and probably eat some big squid burgers and stuff like that. But so nevertheless, hear all these stories of giants that you hear of all these ages and these fighting these 15-foot tall monsters and stuff like this. Well, if this is actually authentic, here's your proof for you, because big old Kwong there is quite the force to be reckoned with. And I know one thing. I'm pretty sure he must be fairly regimental about his meal behavior. And the other things I was thinking of too, that would be, could you imagine, like, because over, especially in those days, there would have been a lot of arranged marriages and stuff like that. There still is today, but I mean, especially back in those kind of times. So can you imagine their Big Kwong here as a poor Ping Ling there or something like that be forced to have an arranged marriage there with a big boy here, and I was also thinking that would be quite the wedding night for her there, and I imagine she'd never forget that. That would be quite a terrifying experience for any human being to see. But another thing I was thinking of too that would be kind of amusing too is if, let's say this guy was still around in modern times and he happened to be brought down to Hollywood and stuff like that, and let's say by accident there he runs into Kate Jenner and the Kardashians and took a fancy to one of them, it would give a whole new meaning to keeping up with the Kardashians because they'd be running their, Kate's already had, it was a former Olympian, of course, so probably has trained these ladies to run in high heels pretty fast, as well as maybe still, I should say, she still maybe eats Wheaties occasionally there. Poor Kate and the Kardashians there would be running up a story here, I'm pretty sure, from Big Kwong. But isn't that an astounding sort of thing if this is actually real? Could you imagine? Could you imagine how terrifying to stand in front of something like that? So, I mean, could you imagine what David would have felt like with Goliath? It'll give you an idea because this guy here is actually on a horse. You can see in the background, you can see underneath his legs, you can actually see horse legs there. So these guys' heads are well. I'm not. I'm gonna bypass that, but anyway. so, so here's the big boy again here at a different part of the movie. There, and he's yeah, posting around Hopsing here in the gang, and so I was thinking, can you imagine if this guy went to one of those all-you-can-eat buffets there, or if you had to be a chef, if you were late for serving dinner there? I don't think you'd want to be doing that, I'll tell you. But anyway, giants exist in many species that are much larger than typically accepted as largest by scientists. I found this especially with sturgeon or different things like that, muskies, all kinds of. There is some bigger ones out there than what they typically claim, and stuff like this, like such as, for instance, this giant alligator gar here, and giant muskie, and our big buddy here, our giant friend Big Kwong there, as well as this creepy sort of some kind of maybe unknown ray of some sort or something. It has some kind of like ray to shark like sort of a features like on it. But whatever this thing is definitely not any species I'm familiar with. But it was found out in the Gulf Coast there around Kuwait, and the size of it is absolutely gigantic. So it's much bigger than anything really known of that sorts of ideas and stuff like that. So whatever this thing is definitely another species unknown to science. But so if I was Vince and the gang there, he could send me off to Japan, and I'll see if maybe the son of Kwong's still hopping around out there. Maybe I could convince him. I'll tell him, I'll be his manager or something. That would be the most entertainment in the entire world, walking in with some dude the size of that. I'll tell you one thing, even at a restaurant, boy, you'd probably be able to get a seat fairly quickly. So there he is. There's the real legendary Big Kwong, apparently authentic from all sources I could find so far. If he's not real, I'm going to be awful disappointed because I've been dreaming for many decades to finally see a super giant in the real flesh, where they could actually prove that, you know what I mean, somebody actually really was like, 9, 10, 11 feet tall, sort of idea, stuff like that. And this boy's fitting the picture here. So great stuff. Now, this creature found dead in Guyana in 2007 had armored back and long tail, and fur with four huge paws. Now, if you look at the size of the paws, I mean, this is way larger than any known tortoise on Earth or any of this kinds of stuff. So obviously, right away, I mean, this species is definitely unknown to science. I mean, but what was interesting is one of the interviews that they did, the scientists claimed that they had actually seen this kind of a beast in the past, but still had no classification for it and no study done on it or anything. So there's nothing really known about it. But I mean, it's very dinosaurian sort of looking like here. It's got these great big huge legs, and so it's some kind of like a super giant tortoise sort of an idea here, or something like that. But for sure, it's not any known tortoise or pinniped or amphibian or fish. It's not an architeuthis species. It's not a lizard. It's not crocodilian. It's none of those things. It's not a whale. Any of this kinds of stuff. So obviously, it is another species that should have been described. And what really makes me upset about these things is here you have these astounding finds that should be hailed by science as this amazing thing that you're finding either some ancient throwback that's still living in modern times, if they're correct, of the age of the Earth, or whatever the case may be. It's still an extremely fascinating species here that should be cataloged and stuff like that, instead of throwing away these great finds of the century because they're controversial, may look dinosaurian and stuff like that. Don't want the headache. Like here's another one. Now that this one kind of reminds me sort of. It's not the same like a Catabarosaurus, but it has a very similar kind of that thin kind of snake-like body at the end. This particular species seems to have a larger beak and a bit of hair on it and stuff like that. So it could be some kind of unknown sort of even odd pinniped sort of a like species or something, or who knows, but it's interesting. It's not eating away that much on the skin parts and stuff like that, and this fur is still intact and a lot of different things, even the eyes and all that kind of stuff like that. And it's definitely not matching any creature that I'm familiar with anyways, across the globe like that. I don't know of any dolphin that looks exactly like that or would have that kind of fur and these kinds of stuff. But it does remind one of this Catabarosaurus in some ways, with the serpentine-like body and the smaller head there and the stuff like that. Although this one's a bit on the smaller sort of a size compared to the typical sightings of a Catabarosaurus, as well as they don't describe it with the fur on its head and that's kinds of stuff like that, and the extra fur and things. But and the long beak as well is typically more shorter and rounded sort of an idea. But nevertheless, this sort of an idea. So I mean, there could be like a family, a species here of several kinds of these kinds of serpentinian like sort of creatures that would be in this smaller size range, and then maybe some kind of large versions of them, like our previous friend there, Mr. Leviathan, sort of an idea, kinds of creatures. So there's obviously is species unknown to science that are being washed up on our beaches, that are being ignored, and should have been given Latin names and stuff like that. Like in BC alone, there's well over 1,000 sightings of this Catabarosaurus, and even a body of one was found of this, so-called Catabarosaurus inside of a whale. I do not think it is exactly, like I said, the same species and stuff like that, but it's the same kind of an idea here. So it's just another sort of a mysterious serpent-like sort of a creature that has also some kind of mammalian sort of like properties to it and stuff like that. Some kind of bizarre mixture of some sort of thing here. So, but whatever this family is, there's you get these similar sightings and looks like that sort of idea. Now, the mighty trunco. Now, this one's interesting. Now, because nobody actually had the fur in their hands and stuff like that, and things like that, but it was claimed that this thing was a big furry creature. Now, here's some photos there and stuff like that. I've actually seen something similar to this on a beach, and it definitely could be whale blubber. And it does look exactly very similar to this sort of thing like that. And you can see the trunk-like body here in the front. And it is known that killer whales and stuff like that, they'll flip these things up just like they do seals and things like that. So when the witnesses had actually seen this trunco thing battling with these killer whales, they actually really did see what they were seeing, because it would have looked alive. You would have seen the big trunk-like thing. You would have seen all the fur, and you would have thought that it was fighting with these whales. But in fact, all they were doing was flipping it back and forth. But it would have made it look like it's flying up through the sky and battling with them, sort of idea. So even though their stories sounded insane and all that kind of stuff, and nobody believed it until even recent when they actually found these archival photos in a museum, it does prove that they actually did see what they did describe it accurately, and it was just kind of a bit of an illusion there because of this unusual behavior that these whales have. So in this case I'm pretty satisfied that definitely was not a unknown animal to science or anything like that. But it does go to show why scientists can be skeptical and things like that, because sometimes and quite often it can be something like that. But in those certain cases, the ones I showed you before, 100% they're not known species to science, and I will adamantly defend that belief to the ends of the earth with anyone out there. Simply because I've studied these things all my life, and I just there's nothing, no way that those kind of shapes and stuff like that could be this kind of species or that they claim, when they're very different in size, maximum known, and all kinds of stuff, and it just never could match up properly. So that's the problem there. But now, next, historical sightings of dragons and dinosaurs through the ages and many artworks depicting them. Now that I have shown you some modern day species that have been found that do not fit any known species or solved, now there is literally hundreds of these finds on beaches, etc., around the world that do not fit any known species. As well, many have dinosaurian like features, and therefore some new policies need to be in effect, where it is a mandatory thing because these places are government funded, a lot of universities and stuff like that. If a carcass cannot be identified easily and found on public property, that samples should immediately be taken and tested against all known life forms. And if it ends up being a different new species, even if you don't have a full body and stuff like that, it should be described and should be get classified and these kinds of stuff. Because I mean, you can't ignore something. I mean, it's on the beach, it's there, and it really is not a whale or it's not these things. The public has a right to know of these kinds of stuff like that. A lot of universities are funded by all kinds of public money and things like that. And why hide the truth? We want to find out these things and new interesting species and stuff like that. And it should be a lot more available out, and stop just passing the buck every time claiming something's a basking shark or things like that, when obviously it can't be, in a lot of cases and stuff like that. So, I'd like to see that. I mean, I think it's just really important that since science has changed constantly since I've been a kid, like I said, from slow, dumb-witted animals, dinosaurs were, to now they were almost rocket scientists and birds and what have you, and every week it's a new theory. But bottom line is that these, since things have changed so much and each one has said the other one was wrong and what have you and stuff like that, it's not a big shame here to actually just maybe start getting on board with the new kinds of theories out there that obviously, it's logical that for sure at least some dinosaurian like species probably did survive until more modern times. By the time you even just look at this small amount of stuff I'm going to show you, you can clearly see that even if one of these were true, then that would mean that obviously at least some did. And that's the whole point of this argument, nothing else. It's not a stating that every animal, some didn't die out ages ago or any of this kinds of stuff. You can't prove that. But you could prove that, some might have survived to modern times due to just the little thousands of examples of them being depicted and people mentioning them and stuff like that. It seems astronomical that they all could just be imagining things. So we'll go through all this kinds of stuff like that. So let's celebrate the rise of the dragon and prove that the dragon really existed and may actually still does. Who knows? But we'll go through some more evidence. Now, Here's an interesting one. Natives obviously knew of the dragon, like this depiction on a rock face thought to be likely several thousand years old, but for sure well over 200 years old, due to that's when it was first recorded and cited by the white man or the white guys, the gringos, right? So, so us gringos there, that's the first time we've seen that. And I mean, seriously, you see the crest on it, you see the flames coming out of it. I mean, quite clearly there, it's a dragon-like sort of a creature. Now, skeptics claim depictions of dragons on maps were imaginary and just meant uncharted waters. However, it is interesting if you check these maps, often they have 100% accurate measures. They often list animals in the region and things for travelers to see or beware of. Most of these animals are proven real. Why would you make up some and be so accurate with all the rest? As well as they actually specifically mention a lot of times with the maps that, beware of the dragons in this particular areas, that they're known to kill people or do this kinds of stuff like that. So it can't be this, imaginary thing that they're saying that now maybe in some cases that could have meant such a thing as just, in more modern times it might have meant something like that. But originally speaking, no, it could not have, because the literature that's usually accompanied with the maps clearly indicates that they're actually warning you that there could be dragons or some kind of terrible thing to beware of in that particular zone or area. So that's not a valid viewpoint that they put across, because obviously that's not. As of for instance here, we'll start off. Daniel in the Bible was said to have killed a dragon-like creature. Now the story goes that King Cyrus challenged Daniel's refusal to worship the idol Baal, and Daniel told the king of a conspiracy on the part of the priests. Now the deceptive priests were executed for their treason, and the king allowed Daniel to challenge their god. Daniel killed the dragon by baking pitch like substance and fat and then hair to make like these cake like balls, and then fed it to the dragon. And then the dragon burst open and after eating it. So now Alexander the Great invaded India and other places, and he brought back reports of seeing a unicorn in Germany and a great hissing dragons living in caves in India. Early Greek rulers reported to have brought dragons back alive from Ethiopia. Herodotus, he described griffins guarding nests in Central Asia. Many think the griffin was a legend. Interestingly, some huge eagles and other birds, some over 25 feet in length wingspan, existed in the past and may be the basis of this so-called legend. It could be because the bird was so wide and muscular that it would have had the body of a lion more in width and possibly color similar to a lion. So they use that as an example. It could also be that this odd species may have not had all feathers across its body, and some parts was more leather-like. There is even many mentions of giant birds and depictions flying off with people and even horses. It could be possible that a few large territorian-like species survived until at least somewhat modern times, and simply the width and features made the huge bird remind one of a part bird, part lion-like creature. Like up into at least the 16th century, a bird of New Zealand that was called the Haas eagle flew the skies and may still. This bird stood 6 feet tall or so, and at least it had a 10-foot wingspan on it. So, if you're seeing something like that, I mean, it would be very huge, 6 foot and stuff like that. You would want to describe it as some other big monster kind of animal that you would have in your local area, so the natives would be, you know what I mean, kind of give it those kind of things, because that's the closest thing they can think of. Josephus mentions about small flying reptiles in Arabia and Egypt. He also mentions the ibis attacks them and is their predator. Here in an ancient coin, along with thousands of other depictions in many places, all show the griffin creature, including even in Britannia. Is it possible that some kind of odd giant eagle-like bird existed that was have dino changing into a new kind of bird species sort of a thing? Because if scientists are correct now with the newest theory that they were some kind of birds, maybe it was some kind of a bird-like species evolving sort of into something else. Who knows? But anyways, I do believe that in all stories there's always a grain of truth, and I just find it interesting how well that they always describe the thing exactly. Now, Dragons have been described in many reputable zoological books published over the centuries. As for instance, the Swiss naturalist Conrad Gesner had published a four-volume encyclopedia in the 1500s called Historia Animalia. And in there he mentions dragons and said they were rare, but real animals. Encyclopedias mentioned dragons saying they were real until the earlier 20th century. When I was a younger fellow, all the time they would a lot of the schools had older books and materials, stuff like that, that we'd be using from back in the 1940s and the 30s and stuff like that. And all of the encyclopedias that we had, as well as all of the dictionaries and things, would all mention dragons and say that they were real. So, it's only in very recent modern times that actually people have doubted their existence. Previous to that, it was accepted fact and all kinds of stuff written about them. Now, here, this over 5 century old depiction of a dragon killed. Interestingly, the claws match none of the lizards suggested by skeptics and scientists, but do match some recent discovered dinosaur species in museums and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. Just another thing. And again, this dragon was commemorated that it was killed by a hero, sort of a thing. And I mean, if you look at it, it's the details are quite extraordinary. It's got the crest-like thing on it, and all this stuff that they describe so many times. Now, here you find statues and many other forms artwork in South America to Mexico and many other places around the world shows it is inconceivable so many could get such accurate detail unless seeing them. And clearly man caused their extinction. Much mention of this is actually found in a lot of different manuscripts and stuff like that. As a for instance, this one here dated at 200 AD by all methods clearly depicting a dinosaur or some sort of pod-like species. This is well over, and by now there's well over 10,000 of these have been found, dating from 200 years old to over 3,000 years of age by all known dating methods. Because believe me, all kinds of skeptics tried to prove that they were fake and stuff like that. So they really want to put on anything they can, and they're still getting these kinds of dates. So obviously proving that, as well as the patina on them and all kinds of stuff, and even many of them being found in museums that were sitting in there in collections for hundreds of years before even dinosaurs were known to exist. So how could they still then have these accurate descriptions when you know what I mean? Dinosaurs weren't even known yet, and these theories weren't even around yet. So that's another interesting, side note to think about it. Considering just alone in this one area, there's been over 10,000 of these things found. It boggles the mind. I mean, seriously, how anybody could, deny such amounts of evidence like that is extraordinary. But here below a depiction similar to a leviathan of a attack reported in the 1500s, and here on the right, ancient Greece depiction of a water dragon, aka Naga. Notice the two-hole whale. There is actually many reports of whales with two blowholes over the centuries, and even dolphins, indicating possibly several unknown species, or some odd defect in some that would keep the legend going due to whales can achieve a long lifespan. It could be possible that due to these maps would have been made like where the person, like some of these main parts, they would have been like in a shipping lanes and stuff like that, and they would have warned you of this sea monster or these kinds of stuff happening. It could be that, let's say, once every so many 100 years or whatever, that a particular one whale or two out there happens to have this defect on them where they grow an extra blowhole. Then it would migrate back and forth and use particular channels and stuff like that, and feeding routes and what have you. And then these people would have seen this, and occasionally, and this would have kept the legend going from different mariners happen to use the same kind of areas that they're traversing and stuff like that. So that's a feasibility that maybe these depictions are not inaccurate at all. It's simply that it could be that, you know what I mean, this a whale here and there could cause this, or that there actually might have been, or still may be, some kind of unknown species of whale that actually has two blowholes. Either way, it's quite interesting. But if you notice, that creature reminds you very much of the Leviathan type of beast that was found in the Tucalad of Mexico there. You can see a similar kind of a horn like they're depicting. The face and mouth is similar sort of stuff. The hair like spiky like substance coming back. It's back and it's about to attack the ship kind of idea. So it's interesting. It does look very similar sort of a thing. The one pictured below is based on the 1734 sighting by a Hans Egede. Now, Egede was known as a meticulous recorder of the nature, and numerous such sightings similar to this piece found dead in Mexico can be found in numerous records of sightings, especially between the 12th and 18th century. Besides the horn, which is mentioned in some sightings, most so mention the tight giant scales, and notice the head is similar looking. So the Mexico beast matches except for the horn. Now, maybe the male or female only gets the horn. Whatever the case, a similar animal to the descriptions of a leviathan have been found dead several times and have been observed by many times, indicating consistent reports of likely a true living like dinosaur sort of thing. I mean, if you look at that depiction here of the beast blowing out some water here out of his mouth, sort of idea, if you look at that, that looks extremely, extremely much exactly like, again, the Tucalata beast in a lot of ways. The exact about where the neck would start like that, and the head features and the stuff like that, as well as these crazy interlocking scales that it has, and all the kinds of stuff. So it's very interesting. You have to admit that. I mean, thousands of these reports over the centuries of mariners that are used to seeing whales all day and stuff like that, and they're meticulously staring at these things sometimes for several hours or more. Yeah, I don't know how people can discount that so much like that. Just because simply you believe that these dinosaurs died out millions of years ago. Therefore, nobody in modern times could see some kind of dinosaurian looking thing in the ocean, when obviously the ocean's the least discovered of any of our things. We know more about the moon, it seems, in other places than remotely the ocean. I mean, there's all kinds of things in there can hide. So I don't really find these things that unfeasible in that way, when many new species are found all the time and stuff like that. Now, this one here to me is one of the best, most important pieces of evidence that you could really look at in a lot of ways. This is an ancient cave art, so it's already been proven and checked out by many, many experts that it's extremely old. So it's way, way a gazillion years here before, dinosaurs were known and all this kinds of stuff. Now, here are these Aborigines. They're all circling around, and they've gotten this plesiosaur-looking creature here stuck in a swamp-like thing, and they're all going to kill it. Now, they even show the insides of the creature, what its intestines and everything look like. Now, any person who's a dinosaur expert, I could show a 4-year-old child, I could point this picture out to many, many little kids, and all of them would say dinosaur, plesiosaur, instantly, right? Like, I mean, you could clearly see the flippers here. They're not even feet. You can see the tail. You can see the dragon-like scale-like sort of indentations that they're showing and all this stuff. I mean, it's not a stain. It's not imaginary. It's not a fake. It's not any of these kinds of stuff. So obviously these people saw this thing. I mean, I don't see how you could, if they saw a fossil, they would have drawn a fossil. They would have shown, you know what I mean, the rib cages and all the kinds of stuff. They would have drawn in this kind of fashion. These people are clearly here describing that they're hunting, and they're surrounding this great beast, and they're going to kill it. And they describe this in their literature, in their ancient passing down of stories and stuff like that, of this exact kind of a beast. So they have it in their verbal, drawing literature, writing literature, this kinds of stuff. So I mean, I don't really see how any skeptic could actually say that, you know what I mean, that they clearly, obviously did sees some kind of a beast here that looks identical to what we would call a plesiosaur. Now, I want you to look at this. This is very interesting because later on there's an important reason for it. But here, this 15th century hero. He was honored for killing this dragon. Now look at the legs of it. Look at this particular kind of species of dragon, how it is, the big long serpentine body there and stuff like that, and how its legs are there, and its other legs are way back here, and this kind of stuff like that. So keep a memory of that sort of stuff. But I'll show you something now. Ulysses Aldrovandus, holy mackerel there, that was a rough one. Aldrovandus, who collected thousands of animal specimens and was an early scientist, actually mentions about examining a dragon and stuffing it for display at the museum. It had two legs and was immature, so basically a baby dragon with little wings. It was killed by a farmer with a stick, and after Ulysses examined it and prepared it for display in 1572, it was put in the museum and it was killed in Bologna, Italy. So here it is down there, and I mean, this guy was a guy that had done this all the time. He collected thousands of specimens, yet his own brethren now calls him, you know what I mean? The guy was hallucinating. It couldn't have been that, and he was just an idiot sort of idea. But obviously, I mean, this is one of the drawings of it, the only known depictions of it and stuff at the time, and things like that. But I mean, clearly that is very, exactly like the dragon-like stories, as they say, and this kinds of stuff like that. And even its teeth, he said, were smaller and immature, softer, sort of thing like that. And so he quite describes it. I mean, seriously, it's fascinating how even scientific people are describing these things, yet it's knocked down by their own scientific community. Now, the Aberdeen Bestiary, written in the early 1500s, that still resides in the library of Henry VIII, shows and mentions depictions of dragons. It says, the dragon is bigger than all other snakes or all other living things on earth. For this reason, the Greeks call it draken. From this, it is derived its Latin name Draco. The dragon is often drawn forth from caves into the open air. Again, the caves mentioning everywhere in every culture, always that these creatures live in a cave. This causes the air to become turbulent. Description of the dragon. It has a crest as well as a small mouth and a narrow blowholes through which it breathes, and puts forth its tongue. Its strength lies not in its teeth but in its tail, and it kills with a blow rather than a bite. And if you even look at this particular smaller version here, they do have a long tail, so that would be peaceful. You can see the thing would whip it around, kind of knock it, injure it, and then you would make the fatal bite with your, after that, and kind of kill it, something like when a cat would pounce on somebody or something like that, kind of an idea. It is free from poison, this particular species he was describing, and they say that it does not need poison to kill things because it kills anything around with its tail. From the dragon, not even the elephant, with its huge size, is safe for lurking on paths along which elephants are common to frequent. And later, I'll actually show you one of the depictions of an Indian giant dragon-like creature that they have in their so-called mythology. And this creature would actually do that. It was much bigger than an elephant and would kill and hunt them. So very interesting. Again, another depictions, this kinds of stuff like that. Now, this 200 AD depiction, along with thousands of others, have been found on different things from rugs to cave walls, depicting dragon, dinosaur-like creatures. Notice the crest as Ulysses described. Okay, so totally different culture, different place, and everything. Yet the same kind of crest like on it. Now, the Wawa dragon was said to have lived in a large cave under Wawa Hill around the 8th century. That was finally killed by a peasant man. The cave is located on the banks of the Vistula River in Krakow, Poland. I wouldn't mind going down there. That would be, that's the place to be. Krakow, Poland's got all the action. I mean, you got unicorn sightings down there. I've talked to all kinds of people, like I said, from Poland that have claimed they've saw a unicorn. They got the Walwal monster dragon bones here that I'd love to check out. There's a couple ladies that look like Stifler's mother down there. I wouldn't mind checking that out either. And so there's all kinds of ancient history there in Poland that would be extremely entertaining to say the least. But most of all, I'd love to see this dragon bones here. But you know, so but it's a very interesting story. Now, the Walwell Cathedral is over 900 years old, a Catholic church. And now, interestingly, they still display the big bones of this Walwell dragon that was supposedly killed there. The beast was killed likely in the 11th century. Now, there is several versions to the story, but the oldest is 11th century of two brothers feeding sulfur to the dragon, just like King David there did to the dragon sort of idea. So it's interesting. Yeah, you know, another exact sort of a thing where they use the sulfur to do this, and then arguing over who really killed it. So one brother killed the other and took the bride and the rewards. And that, but however, though later his secret was revealed, and then he was banished him, and then they erected monuments to award the real hero, his brother. But now another version claims the same thing, but it was the other brother that did the bad deed. So, so whichever the two brothers here, apparently one of them got the you know, the hot king's daughter and the cash and all the glory and that sort of thing. You know, as your typical hero is going to get. Now, the third version in the 12th century finally indicating that this dragon would have been hundreds of years old if it was the same one mentioned centuries earlier, or possibly its offspring was the one finally killed. Now, in this version, it was killed by a man named Scuba. And I wonder when he killed it with the pitch and sulfur, like Daniel did to the monster in the Bible, if the crowd had all screamed out "Scuba dooba doo." So I wish there was a time machine. I'd love to go right back at that time there and check out which of these characters actually really did kill this dragon. If this dragon actually existed, was it the Scuba guy or was it one of these two brothers there? But anyways, Scuba got the reward of having the sexy king's daughter again as the bride for the king, and so there you have it. So. Another interesting tale there, and there's an ancient depiction of this, you know, Walwell dragon and stuff like that. And what I do find fascinating about it is here you actually have possible real authentic evidence where there's actually these bones there, you know. Now, I've heard some skeptics claim that this and that, it could be whatever, a bunch of bones mixed together and stuff like that. But as far as I know, nobody's actually really tested these. So just from looking at something wouldn't mean anything, and that would be just somebody's opinion. But I would love to go there myself. Would be an adventure to Poland. Is extremely entertaining, and you're going to get to see all this kind of ancient stuff like that. That's right up my alley. But I definitely would like to see this dragon bones here and check out this. The historian Gesner there reported in 1543 about a dragon appeared near Syria within the confines of Germany, which had feet like lizards and wings similar to a bat, with an incurable bite that would cause great sickness. Other mentions of this separately can be found from other historians mentioning either instant death from their bite or great illness. And just like bees, one stings someone's, nothing happens, others instant near death. So I believe this to be feasible. I mean, it would be very possible that, or several species of a similar sort of thing, and one has a poisonous bite and the other one isn't as poisonous. Just like there's all kinds of species of scorpions, snakes, what have you. Yeah, you know, this sort of thing. So, I mean, that's not unbelievable either that could have been. The Italian historian Aldra Vandus also said he received in the year 1551 a dried dragon, and he noted that the wings was small and not likely to be able to fly. However, it is possible because it was in a ship that some of the wing parts may have broken off. The Greek historian Strabo, now, he explained that in India, there are reptiles roughly 2 cubits long with membranous wings like bats. He also described at night when they fly, if they pee or poop in the sky and it lands on you, it will putrefy your skin. Now, some skeptics would laugh at this, but I checked this out, and it seems many species of urine, of animals' urine or feces or sweat, could contain some kind of bacteria that could cause toxic skin-like conditions on people if it touched you and got especially into an open wound. And interestingly, in those climates where these things were reported, often their skin would be dry and maybe cracked. So if you think about it, that would be easy for the bacteria to enter you if it landed on cracked skin. So although the story may sound odd, technically it seems to be sound that it could have been possible that the story isn't that far-fetched there where it actually could have been. Now, Mega Xanthonius in 2nd century BC also mentions these flying serpents and also mentions the urine causing terrible wounds in the skin. Now, here this cave, thousands of years of old, shows natives surrounding a creature that looks like a sauropod dinosaur. One skeptic claims he solved this recently, and he claims it's a snake and a bear and a stain in the middle, and they all melted together somehow over the years, creating this shape. Now, one would wonder, why would stains grow up above a dino's head? The gravity pulls things down, not up, and you can clearly see that there's a crest-like thing there on the top of its head, as well as the tails. Bears, of course, don't have tails and stuff like that, so there'd be a problem with that sort of thing. The legs, I mean, are very different than a bear's, much taller and stuff like that. That means that the stain would have had to fall down this way as well. And as well as the natives all circling around this great beast with the great big long neck, but somehow he's convinced that he solved this. And people really sure love to get themselves their bit of notoriety out there. But I mean, to me, it just the only notoriety that would have in my mind is how silly and how desperate you are to get yourself listed as that you've said something of importance. Because seriously, that's really extremely ridiculous. But nevertheless. If you look here now, here's this one over 2,000-year-old depiction shows the same thing. Now look at that. Now, do you believe that one's a stain too? So, like seriously, like look at the head, the actual, the perfect shaping of it. You got the eye here. You got old friendly there, and it's got the big giant feet, exactly like they always show these brontosaurus sauropod like dinosaurs depicted, and everything matches exactly this one here. As a for instance, the exact same kind of thing, like right to the T. So, but there's so many of these. So, but anyways, this guy's, he's convinced that he's got the answer because people just can't handle the fact that actually dinosaurs really did exist with mankind, and in so many mentions I'm going to go through where they actually mention they did kill them and hunt them. So it's just. People got to start facing the truth. There's just too much of this stuff around to just say it couldn't be. Now, Marco Polo, as a for instance, he mentions an absolutely terrifying creature that sounds exactly like a big Pala there. In the travels of Marco Polo, he mentions of running into dragons in the province of Karajat and about a T-Rex-like creature. He says he describes it at the forefoot that it has two short legs with three claws, exactly like what a Tyrannosaurus Rex would have. And it also has a terrible, formidable jaw, large enough to swallow a man. Again, kind of T-Rex sort of an idea here. And sharp, large teeth. As well, its looks causes terror upon any human or animal when approaching it. So, again, this sounds like something like that in that previous picture there, Big Pala. I mean, when I'm looking at that thing, that's even though I can't believe in my mind it's real, I still gives me the creeps just looking at it, thinking that if that sucker still exists, man, even though I'd love to discover it, but only on the condition that I wouldn't want to harm it, and is it going to harm me or any of my staff or any people I'd be working with? And I don't want them harming anybody, but nevertheless, it sounds exactly like that kind of a description here. So that's interesting, and I mean, Marco Polo was known to be, a fairly accurate sort of an individual here. He also mentions the weight of them is so heavy that they bring their kill to water holes, and their impressions would be like dragging a giant cedar through the sand. Many two-legged dragons have been described, especially in Europe, and since Marco Polo is considered to be accurate in his descriptions, except for these kinds of things because people cannot fathom them, still I find his description and habits of these serpents match many others in other areas and sounds feasible if they truly existed, which it seems in all likelihood that they did by the thousands of mentions of them and drawings and descriptions. Mentions of the phoenix bird have often screams to be mythical. However, what if some kind of dinosaurian-like bird species that had unusual habits existed? What if these guys are right to the degree that dinosaurs and birds were related somehow? Okay, so that doesn't prove that they turn into a human being or any of this kind of stuff, but let's say they were correct about that sort of stuff. You always hear these ancient accounts about this phoenix bird, that it would always be by itself and it would sit there and guard its nest. And then when it would die, then eventually it would set into flames, and then out of the ashes, then a new one would arise. Now, what if this creature had a habit like some kind of monitor lizards do and different stuff like that, that knew that in order to cause the incubation and stuff like that, it might have been some odd species that was either self-impregnating, which there is such creatures that can do this, but let's say that these stories, because I always find there's always a basis to these stories. So let's say you got this unusual looking, fiery kind of looking bird slash dinosaurian sort of a thing that looks like really unusual. And let's say that it's guarding and now it's laid its egg. It always is just like a one singular sort of a thing. Or if they did mate, the males or females or whatever would stay in other locations, and that's why only the particular one bird would always be seen by itself. Whatever the scenario here, somehow they would have laid an egg out in this desert-like sand kind of stuff like that. And then when the creature would die, maybe then just after so many hours or minutes or whatever, that this creature might have had some kind of natural oil in its feathers or stuff like that, but the second that it starts to dry out, that maybe the feathers and stuff might have had some kind of combustible, very easily sort of a combustion sort of a thing to them where they could burst into flames. So let's say you're a viewer of this. You see now this creature, he dies down, and then all of a sudden a bunch of flames start. So now then after this, flames is actually what is now going to trigger the incubation. Now they don't say he comes out of the flames, they say he comes out of the ashes. So let's say now this heats up the ground a little bit better. Your egg's buried underneath there, some kind of bearing sort of instead of making the typical nest. And now this causes the hatching incubation sort of process to come, and maybe then the bird comes out of this ashes and then flies away. Could be that the bird actually is large enough size when it comes out that it's or has a longer incubation period, that maybe it's bigger by the time it finally breaks out a large egg, or whatever the case, some kind of scenario like that. And then these people would have seen this thing coming out later and flapping away, and they would believe that it's actually the same, you know what I'm saying, a bird that had just died there. But no, that's might have been what happened. And now this is not unfeasible. It really isn't. There's monitor lizards and stuff like that will use eggs and put them into hot particular sands around volcanoes. Others use like ants or different kind of mounds and stuff like that because the temperatures are very consistent and things like that. So it could be feasible. And maybe that's why the species died out, because people would have found these things of reverence or whatever, maybe caught the little one as it was now coming out of this metamorphosis now because it's finally hatched or whatever. Who knows, but whatever this bird species or whatever it was must have been just near, even in the earliest of man times, must have been near extinction in the first place because of its strange habits of not mating regular and having tons of eggs and this kinds of stuff. And this could be that there might have been some real basis of truth to it. Possibly, it could be. So it's just a thought, but I mean, like I said, I always find there's a grain of truth to these things, and I could see such a thing being feasible, like that. That could be possible, where this myth would have started because the bird would have stood ground and guarded the nest as long as it could, and maybe they only have their first child, like their first egg laying when they're really old, when they're about to die. So then the thing dies. The heat somehow bursts it into flames over time because maybe their material that they had was very combustible, and away you go. It could be feasible that even the flaming part wasn't necessary for the bird to actually come out, but it could be that just the thing would have fallen near where it's put its egg into the ground, and then it would have fallen over the top of it and given this illusion. Either way, I'm pretty sure that's probably that this creature might have actually existed, because too many people mention historians and different ones that there seemed to be actually that there might have been a basis to it. Other interesting things. Now, the Roman historian Dio, that chronicled the goings on in the Roman Empire in the second century, talks about Regulus, a Roman councilman who had fought against the Carthage when dragons suddenly crept up and settled behind the wall of the Roman army. The Romans decided to kill the giant beast, and then they skinned it and sent the hide to the Roman Senate. Now, the hide was measured by order of the Senate and was found to be 120 feet long. So now, seriously, I mean, this is like in their official records and stuff like this. Even though it's more serpentine sort of a kind, and actually not like some of the typical dragons, more a bit more snake-like, but nevertheless, definitely 120 feet in length. Obviously, much larger than any of the known species of snakes or dragon sort of like creatures here. So obviously, whatever it was, it was this sort of an idea here. Now, here, this 14th century bishop's gravesite depicting a sauropod dinosaurs hundreds of years before dinosaurs were discovered. Even things like the woods surrounding Penellan Castle, Glamorgan, reported flying serpents with scales that looked like jewels until the 19th century. He mentions they were hunted to extinction because they were a terror in the fields. Again, my belief that man caused dragons, or aka dinosaur like species extinction, not a meteor, is shown accurate often. There is no possible way that thousands of depictions from pottery to cave paintings could have been all fossil experts and depict them properly, and it's a ridiculous assumption, and it's really unfathomable, to tell you the truth, if you really analyze it. Now, Showroom, who was a prefect of the entire territory, had written in his own words on a warm night in 1619, while contemplating the serenity of the heavens, I saw a shining dragon of a great size in front of Mount Pilatus, coming from the opposite side of the lake. There is a cave that is named Flew Hogarth, and it was moving rapidly in an agitated way. While seen flying across, it was a larger reptile's head and ferocious gaping jaws. As it flew, it was like iron struck in a forge when pressed together that scattered sparks. At first, I thought it was a meteor from what I saw, but after I diligently observed it alone, I understood it was indeed a dragon from the motion of the limbs and the entire body. Now, here this 14th century dragon was reported. The consistent look of them across the board in so many countries seems improbable that they did not truly at one time exist. Do you really believe simple peasants to kings were all expert archaeologists and put bones together and then drew them correctly? I mean, it seems unfathomable. Now, here's some other things here, like here in this early map here, you actually see where they're showing here unicorns, which is fascinating here. And you see up in Canada there and that. Now, somebody put in this Canada after, actually. Originally wouldn't have had that. But nevertheless, this is an old map there. And it's quite interesting there, showing it. You have the unicorn, this kinds of stuff like that. So there's lots of these maps where they depict things that should not be. And there's all kinds of skeptics of these, yet Again, you'll quite often find literature with the maps quite clearly describing the animal and saying, beware in this area or you will find them there, or stuff like that. So, obviously that's what they really truly did meant, and they're just showing you, just like in any typical book, they describe the creature, but they also show a picture of it, sort of idea. Now, here are the 13th century map showing flying dragons and warning of areas to avoid. And you quite clearly see it here. Now here's a very interesting one. Again, the skeptics have made a lot of money writing these books and stuff like that when they didn't really research properly, stating, unicorns are a modern invention and stuff like that. I mean, in this depiction here, you can clearly see. Here's this 400 BC coin showing otherwise. Depicting is very identical. They're the same as like the other couple of horses here, except this bad boy here has the twisted unicorn, coming right up his head here. So again, there's all kinds of this stuff, and including the tales of emperors owning them and bringing out these unicorns and these dinosaurian creatures out on special occasions and stuff like that, as this coin here is clearly depicting. Now, here, the beast was described by several historians, stating India had a giant dragon that would kill elephants, and there he is. So you can clearly see that. I mean, this creature is obviously way bigger than the elephant, and it's very dragon-like. It's got a crest-like thing here with these spikes and the big ferocious teeth, and the whole do exactly, very similar to this creepy dude here on the left. And one of my favorite artworks of these dinosaurian sort of thing. Here, this ancient Mayan cave art shows a creature very similar to some kind of raptor-like dinosaur. This artwork predates by over 1,000 years of the first knowledge of dinosaurs, yet they depict one so accurate, sort of an idea here. Obviously, that isn't a snake or any that sort of thing. Now, there is no evidence any place on Earth that you can find of any civilization putting together bones to reconstruct fossils, and even if ever was one found, or even if there was many of them, that could still never explain how cultures all over the world depict accurate artwork of many sorts of then unknown dinosaurs, because then this would have to suggest that the technique of reconstructing fossils was known by all, from cave peasants to kings, and they all got it right each time by finding a bone or two and imagine what it looked like, and then made artwork or told of seeing it alive and describing exactly the same. I mean, come on, seriously, that's laughable. It really is. So, the proof for living dinosaurs up to modern times is much more than the theory that they all died out 65 million years ago. And what you will see coming up is just a smidgen of the thousands upon thousands of art pieces depicting some so well that one would have had to have huge advanced knowledge in archaeology to have gotten them so accurate. So again, it's not feasible. I mean, there's just too much of this stuff to be all now. A book written in 1614 called True Generation of Serpents by John Trundle. And he mentions in 1543 about winged serpents attacking people in France with a deadly bite, and describes dragons in many locations across the world. A Mormon monk mentions in his 18th century diaries, I've read through this diary myself, it was this man's personal diary, of a large dragon going in a church and killing patrons. They attacked it and shoot it off. Just like the shoot dog of England, a religious man wrote of the attack and was considered a liar for hundreds of years, now until the grave of this great beast was found, and the entire story was true. The skeletons there exactly as they described it, the same size as they described it. They didn't even, exaggerate it at all, sort of idea. So it's, again, exactly as they described. Likely, again, this story is true, even though the odds of people making up imaginary monsters attacking them in their personal diaries seems to me very, very, not logical. I mean, seriously, especially religious people, because I mean, religious people have done bad things too, and broken commandments and all this kinds of stuff like that. But nevertheless, when it's their own personal diary and it's only to they know that God, if that's what they believe, that God would see this and stuff like that, they're not going to lie to that kind of stuff like that. And I mean, why would they care who are they lying to or for what reason when it's their own personal diary? Nobody else is going to see it. B, the main thing to me of that kind of stuff like that is that it, they're writing about their own personal experiences and stuff like that, and in those days they believed in such animals existed out there. So when he's writing this down for his own personal memoirs, well, he's not going to have to worry about hiding this fact or anything like that. It was knowledge already because the other patrons would have seen this as well, and everybody at that time believed in dragons and what have you. Now, here this ancient Indian artwork shows dragons fighting with elephants. As I mentioned, it was common in coliseums to have mention of great beasts fighting elephants or lions, etc. Why would you advertise and risk a crowd attacking you if you have no monster to fight? It's just like, if you told the crowd to have free beer at Joe's and you go there and then all of a sudden there's no free beer, well, the gang's going to get a bit restless and stuff like that. So the same thing is they're not going to be depicting or advertising these, events and stuff like that, or describing them of fighting big monsters and this kinds of stuff in the arenas, unless they actually would have had such a thing. And you can clearly see by the size of these dragons that obviously they were bigger than elephants, some of the species of them, anyways. So this is where these stories come from. You have a very simple thing. You have a smaller variants, sort of things like that may have been children. Then you have an extremely large variant that was probably killed off in very early times simply because anything like that around a village or anything would be considered, terror and or revered, or they'd want to kill it or worship it. Or all these kinds of ideas. Eventually, something like that would end up, being fairly wiped out quickly. These bigger ones. Smaller ones would have been able to hide longer and what have you and stuff like that. But there may have been like obviously numerous sorts of species here of this dragon-like dinosaurian family, and over time people going into new areas when they'd run across especially these bigger specimens and stuff would either try and capture them for some kind of exhibits or to kill them, finding them a threat, or all these kinds of different things would have contributed to their eventual extinction. No, there is a movie you can find that a man took up hours to film, seemingly of an unknown pinniped-like species due to they have a strange head slightly different than seals or manatee, but they also have three distinct splits in the tails and a strange ring around the eye. Now, interestingly, in the 14th century, you see the exact same depiction not far off from what you see on the film, indicating likely the species was described and portrayed accurate even centuries ago, and may be an unknown species to science in modern times, but was known back in those days. I have also seen this three-tailed depiction in many other older artworks, all looking similar, indicating likely a real cryptid. So this could be possible that this species that there's a really good film that you can watch from Florida, and it could be that this actually this same animal here is the basis of that, and it was actually known even quite some time ago because there's quite a few I found of these, and I just find it interesting. So. Although not dinosaurian, I just thought I'd mention it because we actually have a interesting film of modern times showing the exact same sort of a thing, and people arguing whether it's a manatee and stuff like that. But it definitely doesn't match any known manatee or typical seal. So again, it could possibly be an unknown species, but it certainly does resemble quite a bit this particular drawing here. Now, here's a fascinating one. Now, this is much earlier than when dinosaurs were discovered yet, okay? And yet, like here in this map, they're showing these giant hairy people that you're going to run across, right? And they got these giant weapons and clubs and stuff like that. So very similar to your sightings of El Misti or a giant red-haired men of the woods sort of ideas and these kinds of things. And here they're quite clearly depicting that. But now here's the fascinating one. Now, if you look at that very clearly, it's very, sauropod dinosaur hair. I mean, 100% this. It's not a giraffe. It's not any, So, I mean, again, how would these people, like clearly over here, they're showing either some large bird species, either they don't look exactly. Like ostriches or anything like that. They look more like a emu sort of a thing, or the might have been the giant birds similar to the reported in Madagascar or something like that. But I mean the giant moa. Who knows? But I mean in this particular one, I'm not sure exactly which bird they're trying to describe there. But I do know that definitely that for sure is a depiction of a sauropod dinosaur of some sort. The bird species could be, even flamingos look a little bit sort of stuff like that. So hard to tell, but nevertheless, they do surely clearly make them quite large, indicating that, again, that they might likely might have been a very large sort of dinosaurian sort of a looking bird there. But they certainly don't look at all like a typical ostrich or anything. So uh, not really sure exactly which specimen that they might have been doing there, but nevertheless, it's another interesting. But for sure, you can't argue over these several dinosaurian sauropod like dinosaurs that you can see up on the map that clearly indicate that you'd wonder how they would get it very accurate like that. When so-called none of these things were known to exist yet. Now, Wise Old Owl says some cryptids are real, like me, the golden owl. If no one bothered to keep researching my little habitat, and my existence would not have been known, and I may have been gone by now. Since some believe the stories has saved me from a likely doom, for now at least, I hope when sightings over long periods are consistent, that you not be so skeptical, my brothers and sisters, may not be as lucky as me, and discovered in time. So give a super duper hoot and say we're for us and take sightings more seriously. If they sound plausible, and you may then hoot with glee at a new discovery, just like this little fellow was discovered. Now, creatures all the time thought as myths as reality, such as this small golden owl that was thought to be legend for centuries, and even once thought heard reportedly by famed Arthur C. Clarke scientists. The owl since then has proven real, and all kinds of cryptids are actually likely fact, and there is many amazing discoveries yet to come, and proves people like Mr. Clarke are not hallucinating or seeing or hearing things in the woods, as the skeptic said. The wise old man of the Hercynian forest still says that there is still reports of the mighty unicorn to this day. I wonder if he's right. Would that not be the find of the ages? It certainly would be. And like I said, I've talked to people, interviewed them that have seen the unicorns, and it's fascinating to listen to. It's hard to believe, but nevertheless, but I still say that at least at one time, some sort of a unicorn, sort of a like creature did exist. Um, Here at the Herrera Museum, you can find an ancient depiction of a dragon like creature. The detail is amazing and clearly shows another example that for thousands of years now, people depicting them near the same exact, some with wings or some without, indicating likely a few different types of these at least. However, since there's hundreds of examples to thousands depending on dinosaur species of ancient artwork depicting them clearly shows that these people must have, as they reported, often hunted and killed these dangers to them and must have seen them to depict them so accurate. And I mean, why would you report killing them and things like that if you didn't? I mean, it makes no common sense. I mean, but it certainly would if they actually did survive until now. Here's some more here. In 1750 BC, a weapon here is found, along with thousands of others, show that obviously man and dinosaurs did interact. You can clearly see a dinosaurian like creature here on this sort of almost like boomerang sort of a weapon. This 1,000-year old Persian dragon matches many other descriptions. You can see them quite here clearly. You can see the scaling like pattern that they put on them and stuff like that. Now here, this ancient cave painting in Kuwait, totally different area than other ones found and stuff like that. Same kind of dinosaur that skeptics said was stains melted together found in another cave. Now, do you believe that's melted together too? I mean, you can clearly see the legs here, the stuff like that. I mean, you know, I don't know how often you can argue with this kind of stuff when there's so many of them found. Like this Granby idol. Now this one's a fantastic one because it's showing everything all in the same thing. This interesting stone of Ice Age era shows two mastodons. It has two dinosaurs on it as well, fighting. Okay, as well as a man holding things, all in the same stone. uh, Again, how could this person clearly depict these things? You know what I mean? Unless they have something to look upon. The depictions by Native Americans in Thompson, Utah, matches 100% a giant known as Quetzalcoatlus. And how could they even get the crest right? Like, there's been, when I was younger, scientists thought that a bird couldn't exist over a certain length. They said it'd be impossible. They could have never flown. But since that time, they keep finding bigger and bigger fossils. They found some, they believed there was a super territorian sort of a bird that might have been, or some kind of like pterodactyl like species. And some of these might have reached like 80 feet or more, these super giant sorts of ones. Now, here clearly in this native wall, you can clearly see this. And in fact, natives still from ancient times, since the first white people have ever been there to see these things or anything like that, they have these native prayer sticks. And if you notice, it's got the crest exactly the same. There's no bird that's like that. But definitely a pterodactyl sort of like species that there was. And again, you'd wonder where they would have gotten this reference and that exact look like that, and you see the exact same crest on it and these kinds of stuff like that. So it's just too much of this stuff to just coincidence here. Now, here's this depiction of a tri-footed dinosaur on this ancient artwork. Shows amazing detail, if imaginary. I mean, seriously, you can quite clearly, who's going to make, like, why are you making these imaginary figures? And if you were, then why is other people also able to imagine the exact same imaginary figure thousands of miles away from you, and they make the same thing around the same time and stuff like that? I mean, there wasn't TV to influence each other here or stuff like that. These stories would have taken ages to pass down to spread across the world so easily, so there's that, as well as like as a for instance, here in 1971, in the Girifalco region of southern Italy, a landslide produced pre-Greek civilization pottery and other tidbits, with some showing clearly a Stegosaurus-like creature there. I mean, there's nothing else really like that, especially in our modern times, that, but you know what I mean, would look like that. And as well here, a 13th century depiction in a church looks much more like a species of dinosaur more recently discovered, and they call it the Compsognathus. So there again, it's interesting that they're depicting creatures that weren't even known by science yet, and matching all the tiny little details and stuff like that. That seems not feasible unless they actually were looking. Uh, Now, especially like stuff like this, like look at this. This is over a 4,000-year-old dragon depiction. Now, look at St. George below in this 14th century, and this beast looks very similar to a dinosaur called Nothosaurus. And if you look at, I mean, it's extremely similar here, extremely so. The legs are almost near identical. The tail's near identical. This a ridge you see along its back and stuff like this. And this was a reported real dragon that the Saint George had fought with and killed, right? And it was well honored across and believed to be an authentic thing at that time, right? So who, like, when this person was doing this, can you imagine the cost and expense like that, and the incredible detail that they make them? And you look at the two, you can clearly see that they're really very extremely similar here. So again, it seems interesting that these depictions over thousands of years are so closely matched here when they're in different continents and places and times and stuff like that, and supposedly based on real historical events where they claim that this, we actually did battle with this dragon. There's many of these. You would wonder how. Yeah, each individual is just going to imaginary the same, and it's going to all fit like that. It doesn't make any sense. Again, though, it would if they actually really did see what they were saying that they saw. Yeah, Now, here are over 10,000 examples of Inca stones, some found several hundred years ago depicting dinosaurs. Modern artists still do this crap, but many examples are aged at hundreds of thousands of years and show natural oxidization and all known dating methods past. And modern copies are from older examples. So some skeptics have tried to claim that these guys are making them modern here, but yeah, they've been always making them. They've never stopped for thousands of years doing this, and since this culture's been around there, and hundreds of years ago, there was already examples of these already found in museums before dinosaurs were known. So you can't say that kind of stuff. Like, as of for instance here, like look at this one example here. You got a triceratops sort of a looking creature here, and a stegosaurus thing looking creature in the back. This kinds of stuff like that. Here's this ancient antique pod here with this a dragon crest there. Notice the same kind of thing. He's got the chin and the funny looking stuff like that. So they're just so identical nearly across the board, and the descriptions of all kinds of people owning them, from emperors to all kinds of that, it seems quite extraordinary to be just all imagination. Natura Rerum states about the author seen dragons with wings so transparent that they seem unlikely to be able to fly. But since he saw many exactly the same, he concluded possibly their wings would have been break off or be broken off before ship, possibly likely to save room or ease of movement. The people packing likely could care less about if it's some of the creature's wings were missing and likely already got paid for the service. It may have been hard to store them with full length of wings, or when preserved may just easily break off. Either way, he saw them at the Williams Museums, and numerous examples coming from different areas and times all had the exact same features and doubted that they could have been fabricated. So here's a guy specifically commenting on them here ages ago. And even back then there was people that had these beliefs that maybe because they had never personally seen a dragon, there's always been a skeptic out there and this sort of stuff like that. So Apatosaurus or Platosaurus or possibly Amplisaurus all look near the same as this 15th century France dragon said to have been killed. And if you look at that, the description's quite amazing. The details are very amazing and likely based on a living representative, possibly one of these so-called extinct species for 6,500 million years, depending on who you're listening to, this kind of idea. And likely was a dragon. Some kind of species of dinosaur at least survived until more modern times and was depicted hundreds of years before the dinosaurs was known yet to science. That no mention of bone collecting in any areas again, yet plenty of mention of fighting live dragons and describing them like dinosaurs, and automatically correct often with dinosaur species since discovered. And so you wonder, like, I mean, how would they have gotten a bunch of species not even known to science yet correct, even sitting in museums and stuff, so you know that they were already there, and now you finally find this new species and it matches it, yet you claim they died out mass millions of years ago, yet they got these depictions of them all over the place. I mean, somebody's got to give here. And I mean, I don't think that these historic monuments that you can actually touch and photograph and look at, and all the descriptions should be changed, because obviously they're being truthful in the sense that they did describe these things and say these things. These are physical evidence we can look at and touch and stuff. The other way, we have nothing except just the theoretical stuff, and that's it. Here is, for instance, This now torn up temple from around 400 AD clearly depicts a T Rex like dinosaur eating a horse. I mean, I don't know what else anybody could really claim that that would be. I mean, obviously, no known lizard species on Earth is that big in modern times and stuff like that, but there was these dinosaurian T Rex sort of things like that. And exactly, you see the paws here coming down, he's grabbing onto it, he's doing the deadly bite and crushing into him. And here's another version, sort of it running and stuff like that. As well here, just to show you, as I mentioned about the Wilderman, Yeti, Sasquatch sort of stuff. I mean, here are these depictions ages ago, and exactly the same. I mean, again, one wonders how could this be so many depictions of this unless they really were, seeing something here, because you can't just keep having people from all kinds of cultures all over the place all imagining the same times at all different eras, and then describing them, saying they fought with them, killed them. You got to think about this seriously. It's not logical. So you can fight for Darwinism all you want. It still doesn't prove that Darwinism isn't real. It doesn't prove any of these things. But one thing that people got to start really questioning is this meteorite theory, and seriously, it's just not logical. So no matter what the rest of it we can't prove or disprove or whatever, but we can certainly, within the highest probability here, show that from all these kinds of just small amount of examples that I've shown you, that obviously people were seeing or depicting things that they believed was out there, and the evidence seems to, clearly state that some of these creatures were quite extraordinary and scary looking, and considering we've even found bodies in modern times that are totally dinosaurian like yet undescribed by science. I mean, seriously, there's just way too, if you really think about it. Here's some more here. Polonius had reported seeing a whole carcass of winged dragons that were being carefully prepared. He said they were thick about the belly and that they had 2 feet and 2 wings like those of a bat and a snake's tail. In the 17th century, a traveler documented all he saw and drew, and the different animals and events. And here he describes a dragon he saw. Notice the drawing is identical in description as Polonius and many others. So, this, there's just so much of this. Seriously, like St. Ambrose gave accounts of dragons, and when he mentioned seen in the neighborhood of the Ganges that was nearly 70 cubits in length. Now, this beast was even larger than the one encountered by Alexander the Great, as mentioned, and obviously was some kind of a early super giant of a dinosaurian sort of a thing that obviously couldn't have survived with man too long before they would have out. But now, the Bible scholar Samuel Bocard in the 17th century made an in-depth study of animals in the Bible. He mentions about how winged serpents are not only a thing of the Old Testament, but were still alive. He states if you're on your travels that you encounter the serpent with wings who circles and hurls himself at you, then beware of the flying snake and hide yourself and try to lie down when the snake appears and guard yourself in alarm. For that snake's matter is to go away calm, and it considers it a victory over you. Also, it says they are winged and flying serpents that can be found that are very venomous, as well snort, as well are savage and kill with pain worse than fire. Again, given this kind of description of this deadly bite, sometimes in some species. 17th century France sighting of giant bat-like birds in skies with poison bites, same thing they describe. Egyptian representations of tail veins with flying reptiles seem amazingly accurate. One wonders how would they know how to draw the vein in the tail and the other anatomical features unless they truly saw them. Books and artwork by the thousands, all depicting similar across the world. Face it, if even one of these stories or drawing or artwork was based on reality, then you have to admit that some kind of dinosaur-like beast survived at least to the times of man. A cockatrice was killed in the 1600s, and a flying dragon was witnessed by hundreds of people, and a booklet was distributed about it around the same time near Henham, Essex. So there you go. You're just describing it there. We're going to go on some more here. The history of four-footed beasts, written in 1658, mentions about many kinds of dragons and even how some of our modern tales come about. And I love this one the best of all. I find this very interesting. And the guy kind of describes everything of our modern kind of beliefs and the stuff about the dragons. It's very interesting. An interesting thing that solves many of the questions of why dragons are depicted in several plus styles by this one writing. Sorry. He states there be some dragons which have wings and no feet. Some again have both feet and wings, and some neither feet nor wings, but are only distinguished from their common sort of serpent snakes is by the comb that grows upon their heads, as well as the beards on their face. Also, he mentions as well a dragon that is black in color. The belly is somewhat green and very beautiful to behold, and the thickest of the area. They have a treble row of teeth in their mouths, and upon every jaw with bright and clear eyes. He then mentions this caused the poets to say in their writings that these dragons are the watchful keepers of treasures. They have also two dewlaps growing under their chin that hang down like a beard. Some are of red color, and their bodies are set all over with very sharp scales, and over their eyes they have flexible eyelids. When they gape wide with their mouth and thrust forth their tongue, their teeth seem very much to resemble the teeth of a wild swine. He then mentions some have small mouths, more like a snake, but ones in India and Africa and Asia often have huge gaping mouths. They usually have 15 teeth on each row, on each side. I mean, seriously, all he described not only solves the riddle of these stories, it also gives in depth descriptions that are way too precise to be made of imagination. So, here exactly, this kind of represents all the dragons being reported around the world there. There's like a serpentine guy with no legs on it at all. And he's got the whole thing covered here. And exactly why that these early modern poets thought that, you know what I mean, that there was treasures and stuff like that because of gleaming of the eyes and these kinds of stuff. So this is a very fascinating thing where this guy's kind of put it all together in one little thing here, ages, hundreds of years ago. So it's quite fascinating. Now, cultures across the world not only report dragon-like creatures or carve them, some even worship them, like in this group here, as well as in the 16th century artwork that was so accurate looking, one wondering, in your mind, how so accurate, what was the reference. And I mean, this painting would have taken this guy ages to do here, and I mean, it's... yeah, for such detail, all this stuff to commemorate some killing of a dragon that doesn't exist, again, makes not much sense, but it certainly would if it actually really did. The Garguet serpent that was killed along the river in Rouen, France in 600 AD by the main account by a saint. There's another version, but basically was killed by this particular saint and was presented to the king. It is thought that this killing of the serpent representation was the influence to change into the gargoyle of today, and wings were added over time. However, independent evidence I have found describes gargoyle-like creatures much earlier than this account makes that doubtful. However, for sure, this is where the legend spread most, and the name gargoyle came from. The creature's head was hung on the new built church to scare off evil spirits. And from that idea, other people started doing the same thing. They started making an artistic sort of a thing of it and kept hanging them up on the churches to scare off evil and this sort of thing. So, from Asian dragons depicted in ancient times to more modern European style dragons like Mercy, and this depiction is going to fly the last little emperor dragon, the mighty Perendor. And dragons have stayed consistent in looks for thousands of years and loved and revered. In modern times, we're predispositioned to draw them these ways. However, in ancient times, no such a broad knowledge of what they would have looked like could have existed, and were really based on real sightings. Now, do any dinosaurs still exist today? The mighty Ropin and other likely living fossils. Out of all the flying cryptids, the Ropin has the most credibility in the Congomado. There has been numerous expeditions for the Ropin. Little I know for the Congomado. However, people on expeditions to regular locals have either filmed or witnessed luminescent, intelligent life flying around the areas of Papua New Guinea and the different islands around in the region, mostly spotted in around the upper Karam River and the Ramu and surrounding region of Papua, Indonesia, and has been filmed and photographed numerous times by even notable cryptid mystery hunter Josh Gates, which I believe to be an honest and ethical fellow, as well as an intelligent crypto chaser. So, his crew filmed one of these luminescent creatures flying. They're mostly witnessed from Papua New Guinea and nearby areas. The natives rarely see in the day, but at night they fly in the skies in search of fish, and they have these luminescent reported properties. All eyewitness accounts are near identical and describe it as a living pterosaur. I actually had one person from a cryptid site say he lived in that area when younger, and he said that the natives say this thing robs graves and smells the flesh of the people, and will dig it up, and glows and looks like a demon bird with sharp teeth. His grandfather claimed he saw one back in the 1940s in a place called Karkar, or something close to that. And he saw it flying over an island called Bagabag, or some similar name to that. I'm not familiar with either of them, and I don't know that area that well or stuff like that. I just basic island of Papua New Guinea and some of the other, but there's all kinds of apparently islands around in the area and that. And all I know is he said that his grandfather saw this beast, and it had near a 20-foot wingspan and much wider than the small boat that he was in. And it had some kind of crest-like thing on his head, and leather-looking wings. And now his sighting was in the day, and he said as well he noted that it had a long tail and no feathers that he could see. The wings, he said, although bat-looking, were more bird-like in the shape of the wings, and he called it a name that I cannot find any reference of. He called it Duahu. Or the other name that he said as well was rope. And he also noted that some say there are three kinds of them: one a small one, and a medium one, and a giant one. And the giant ones are apparently like 80 feet or longer. So far, the only one I can verify satisfactorily is this one kind of rope, and maybe what his grandfather saw was, just a larger version of one. But nevertheless, the typical sightings are usually a little bit smaller than 20 feet sort of range. But there is some reports of quite some big ones. But nevertheless, even if there is a variance in a few subspecies of some sort or whatever it may be, it's definitely the same consistent reports for ages and lots of films of these luminescent, seemingly intelligent life flying in the skies. It certainly gives it at least some plausibility. Um, Many other areas around the world, from Africa to Asia, have similar reports, as well as Cuba. Here is some modern day dinosaur like creatures still being witnessed across the world. Ahul is a giant bat to pterodactyl like creature witnessed in the Philippines. Big Palapali is mentioned, T Rex Solomon Islands. Megalania, giant Komodo dragon like lizard, reported in Australia. Mokele Mbembe, sauropod dinosaur, Belgian Congo. Big bird, giant pterodactyl like creature, Texas. A similar giant bird-like species sighted all over North America and the world. The Emelanatuka. This is an African creature reported by the Pygmy tribes, purported to live in Central Africa. Now, this name means killer of elephants, and it has a huge horn like a rhino, and it's semi-aquatic. Other names for it is the Sekamoke, the Chipkwi, Irazima, Jagugunda, Nagamba Namye. A chief inspector of the region in Africa had reported back in the 1950s. He actually mentions the beast and said that it was a terror, and it would disembowel elephants. The Naga, Mekong River, China, reports of that still. Giant crocodiles, Mahamba, said to be like 50 feet long, living in the Belgian Congo and stuff like that. And if you see this picture of this big old beast here, can you imagine something twice the size of this dude? And I mean, this is as creepy about as you could get. I mean, that really is a real monster there. So that's quite the extraordinary creature. It's amazing that something could get that big like that. Of a crocodile or any kinds of stuff. It boggles the mind how big that they really could get. But could you imagine one twice the size of that? So it would be quite the beast there. So quite something to see, to say the least. Here's some other ones there. Nagoma Mone is a creature spotted in the Ubangi River region of the Congo, even by missionaries, and photographed, reportedly taken by famous big fish hunter Jeremy Wade. He did not state, though, he believes this to be a dinosaur that I know of. He is a scientist and can get into issues stating such things, and some critics state it is a other mammal species likely that got cuts in it from a motorboat. However, I highly doubt him being a well versed angler and biologist and around the world that he really believes that. Simply and sadly, many people of science that witness such things will try and downplay them due to the implications. I cannot speak for him, of course, but looking at this photo and the many descriptions all being the same, I think he is selling himself short for what he saw, and he should be congratulated for such an amazing photo. Like Mr. Wade, I've chased and captured giant freshwater fish since a child and well over 150 species. I've captured on a rod and reel. So I like and respect Mr. Wade very much, but I cannot accept this theory that it's is a known animal. I would like to know more about this sighting. All I know is that if it was a motorboat that chopped the back, then the thickness on either side of these should have been higher, as well as there should have been scars on the side of it and different stuff like that. You're not seeing any of that. And I've actually bumped into animals with a motorboat and stuff like that, and I've seen how the cuts kind of work, and it's nothing like that. And it's very equal spacing. It's much more realistic, live looking, not like natural looking. It doesn't look like something like what they're stating there. So I just don't believe that. As well as these natives have been reporting this thing for ages, way before there was ever such thing as motorboats, and they describe it exactly as what he kind of photographed. So it makes you wonder again. The Mahara is reported to be a stegosaur-like creature living in Kenya, and is described as having plates on his back and spikes on his tails, and it's a herbivore. Nagubo is an animal reportedly living in the savannah region of the Cameroon with three huge horns, and described like a triceratops type creature that kills elephants. Interestingly, in a temple in Angkor Wat, they depict a stegosaur-like beast. Do you really believe natives have the ability to put together fossils and then convince each other they saw a real monster, and then wait around for white man for centuries to thousands of years later, and for the white guy to question them so that they can tell a tall tale? Or more likely, do you actually think that they probably did just depict what things that they're seeing? And again, I mean, you clearly look at that. It is very like a stegosaurus kind of like creature here. And I mean, it's on a temple. The temple's ancient, way before dinosaurs were known. I mean, I don't know what more one can say because these spines are all over the place like this, and I mean, there's just too many of them to argue with. But nevertheless, whether or not that is a real sort of a naga dragon-like sea serpent sort of thing that Mr. Wade had reportedly photographed or not, still, nevertheless, I mean, whatever it is, the natives do report in that same region this same sort of a thing, and clearly he did photograph some, or at least reportedly did, or somebody took this photograph of this creature, and it's quite fascinating. I tell you, to say the least. It's definitely dinosaurian dragon, sort of like looking with these spikes, and definitely not a sturgeon or any of that kind of stuff like that. So whatever this is, it's quite interesting. Now, as well, interestingly, some ancient text that was found describing these beasts that you can see in the right there would wrap their heads around each other, and one would victor over the other. And then some cultures would use this as a victory-like symbol, has been theorized by some. However, originally it was said to be based on a real animal from various old writings. It is different than a giraffe in facial features, and the attacking and killing one another is not giraffe herbivore behavior. This creature was also said to hide along paths and reach out its great neck and pounce on victims, again indicating could not be a giraffe. Were these some kind of dragon-like beasts or unknown dinosaur species? Whatever they were, they have been depicted similar in many places. So many ancient depictions from China to North America of dragon-like beasts and representations of known dinosaurs and mentions of battle with them, compared to theories of all dead from a meteor with nothing to back this theory conclusively, again shows the physical evidence is much more in the favor that at least some species survived until modern times than this theory. From ancient lions thought extinct for hundreds of years, yet found alive in Russia in modern times, to unknown lion-like species reports around the world, to reports of lions and dragons battling or rarely befriending one another. Both these historic creatures are king of the zodiac. One likely has already been pushed off the earth, except in some of our waters, possibly. The other, unless we stop the slaughter soon, will be like whispers in the wind. Yeah, so which be an awful sad thing. So we need to start protecting our animals, because these great depictions, probably none of these creatures exist in modern times, likely, but they may have at one time, and mankind may have caused their extinction in all likelihood from the numerous descriptions here and all these kinds of stuff. It's too much of it, again, seriously, to just throw it all sort of thing. Now, could dragons actually still exist? Here is the most intriguing evidence that was just recently, it's a very recent thing, of a dragon-like creature in modern times. This is part of a film that was shot in a cave in Asia, and it seems to be a baby, and in my opinion cannot be a fake, and the movements it does is beyond lifelike, as well as it gives off all indications of being a living animal. Now, notice in the photo you can see one of its two legs is near the same position as almost all old dragon drawings. Okay, so if you look on the left here, the dragon drawing, you can clearly see that the legs are about in the exact same position. Now, sadly, I was not able to get the middle one, but the middle one actually is exactly the same, as about in the exact same position as typically always dragons are showing. And the tail is exactly the same, with some kind of prehistoric-like tail. It swims from side to side, so like a serpentine thing, sort of a thing, exactly as they've always described. And whatever this thing is, its middle leg seems to be fascinating. It seems that it's able to pump them up underneath its body with some kind of web-like structure. So they're between a leg and a fin, almost like sort of an idea. So he can walk, but he can also swim underneath the water, which is interesting, because a lot of these old reports, you would see the drawings and stuff like that, where sometimes they'd put these kind of like wing-like appendages around their legs and the stuff like that, and this is maybe why they were trying to describe that. And if you look in the legs there, it's very similar, exactly identical almost to the depictions. Now, whatever this thing was alive. It was filmed in a cave in China. It's a small, obviously baby, smaller version of let's say, a dragon sort of idea would be. And it could be actually a survivor of this family. It may not have been the basis of the big giant dragons and stuff like this, and maybe some other similar like species, but nevertheless, this sort of thing clearly shows that something living really does match this dragon-like description. And now, in the young ones, there it could be that, and I've read this in old accounts where they found the young ones and they weren't developed yet, the crests and the stuff like that on them. So if you see here, it's the head's very caiman-like and things like that. So it's extremely interesting. Whatever this thing is, it's definitely alive. I do not believe this to be a fake. Really, I've taken quite a bit of look at it and tried to research it, and by all accounts, it seems, in all likelihood, reality. And it's a very fascinating, interesting specimen here. Whatever this thing is, I'm familiar with a vast majority of kinds of skinks and stuff from around the world, and all these kinds of things like that, lizards and what have you, and like that. And I know of no species that is this sort of thing like this. So, and again, it's so much that matches the descriptions a lot of ways of a dragon-like thing. This would be the find of the century, of actually at least one of their kind has is still existed into modern times. There is another intriguing film out there that was actually filmed by a bunch of not only news place but individual people. There was a great big tornado over in China, and this dragon-like thing actually flies right past the tornado. And I must admit, whatever it was, it's not something being shot by wind here. It seemed to have its own power and kind of thought process here. And whatever this thing was, it flies by, and everybody's screaming in the film, "Dragon, dragon!" They believe it to actually really be one. And so it's another interesting thing again from China. I mean, if any of these creatures do exist, that probably is one of the places on Earth, or Russia or something like that, where something like this could still possibly still exist. But then in upcoming things there. In Africa, still stories of several stegosaurus like creatures with planks on their backs, to a brain sucking monster in a river in Africa, to giant snake like beasts spotted at numerous lakes in South America and Africa, and many other locales around the world from China to Russia. These stories still come in, especially of the negatypes. So stay tuned for the next show, as we're going to continue on with more evidence and more living dinosaurs, as well as the history of angels. Many writers have written books on suggesting angels are more modern origin with the wings, and that there's no older evidence of this. And this is laughable. And the only thing that's sad is lazy people and critics who write these things and do not actually do any research much, make a ton of money selling books with no basis. As for instance, this 450 BC coin here clearly depicts that angels still being depicted today, exactly the same. Yeah, and we'll go through this next episode, the historic facts about angels, and can or do they actually exist, as well as have some artworks, or and of course of some metaphorical sort of angels as well. So please subscribe to due to soon I'm going to release a project, decades in the making, that will interest and educate you about the world of the strange, as well as upcoming episodes I'm going to have in search of mermaids. Nothing I love more than the idea of this cryptid, especially if she looks like any of these two ladies up above here. That'd be perfectly fine. I wouldn't mind running into a mermaid like that. One thing mermaids could not be, however, is there's a lot of people think that, but there is much historic and even modern evidence to cave paintings thousands of years old showing them or mentioning them. Could a cute blonde mermaid like Janny or a gorgeous raven like Katrina be real? And if they are, can you send them over to my place as soon as possible? But all kidding aside, though, seriously, again, there's these massive reports of these. Now, I'm really pushing the realm of believability once you get into these mermaids and stuff like that. But I do like the idea of such a thing. And so, and the historic records are there. Whether I believe in them personally or not is not relevant. But I just show that, there is these historic records. And I believe, again, that there's always a grain of truth to these. So something must have been seen ages ago or whatever that would have contributed to this tale. Now, other things we're going to cover too in some upcoming shows there are like alien sightings, things like that. Did Hitler meet with the Greys here? This is a great picture here with old Schmadoff there and his entourage and meeting the old space alien Greys here. And now other things we're going to cover. Did the Parliament buildings in 1903 get taken over by aliens? Have aliens tried to any of our local poutine here in Ottawa yet, or is our leaders meeting with them now? Did Tesla really meet with a person like myself once who did claiming they were from the Pleiades star system? I met this lady ages ago, and I'll talk about that, where she claimed she was from the Pleiades star system. And at the time, I had never heard of the Pleiades star system. So, she definitely was extremely strange. But luckily, she didn't look anything like this gray dude or dudette, whatever it may be there. But. And I was thinking, if Hitler actually did meet with one of these things, and if this photo is authentic, if he had have said, "Jawohl, you troll," when he first met him there. Nevertheless, these would be some other upcoming kind of more fun, kind of crazy stuff. No, I know a lot of people. Hitler was a terrible man and did horrendous things to humanity, and I'm not. This is not for any of those kinds of stuff. I simply to me, Hitler was a psychotic kook, and simple as that. But nevertheless, I like these conspiracy theories and stuff like that, and you got to include some of this kind of government-like stuff and for entertainment value. And definitely, the Germans were reported to have been, conversing with aliens and all this kind of stuff. So we'll cover some of these kinds of funny, crazy stories and things like that. But for sure, I think I've shown you at least to give you a basic idea that it's literally nearly totally infeasible that literally for thousands of years across all kinds of cultures and stuff like that. You're going to be able to draw the exact kind of stuff. I know this is the same argument I'll give for Sasquatch and stuff like that, but I mean the evidence is there just time and time again and time again and again. People keep reporting seeing both here. Yeah, dragons weigh less, obviously, but back in earlier centuries, they were recorded all the time because they may have just been at their last brink before extinction. I mean, again, if you think about it, any kind of animal that would look like that would either cause immediately fear to people, so they're either going to want to kill it, they're going to revere it and want to worship it either, or they're going to want to capture it and display it or these kinds of stuff. This is the normal human reaction that people have been doing since we've recorded time. That they like doing stuff like this. This is not unusual. Ancient zoos and circus-like things have been around. People have always been interested in the strange and the unusual. So whether it be thousands of years ago to today, so these kinds of stuff. I mean, obviously, people we're seeing you just can't get this many right all the time, and why do you write in your own personal memoirs these things when if they're not real and no basis, and why would dictionaries and encyclopedias and all these scientists and people write and say they were real if they weren't? And again, even if one of the stories was true, you'd have to at least still admit again that at least a dinosaur or two made it to modern times. So no matter what, I think I've kind of proven at least to a certain degree that at least out there is a feasibility that at least some dragon dinosaurian like species probably in the all highest likelihood existed in the times of man, for sure. So but nevertheless, we'll go on to some other stuff, some other fascinating things out there. But definitely, if you happen to hook a mermaid there and she wants to hop in the boat, needs a place to live, definitely you can contact me there. But anyways, take care, and hopefully I've entertained you. Sorry, it's a bit of a long show. I skipped over some of my words. I don't feel well. mouth is dry as heck here. I was trying to have coffee through it and stuff like that. But basically, at least I gave you an idea of tons of the evidence out there that's really showing that the evolutionary stuff and some of these theories of meteorites and stuff like that really don't have much to stand on in all reality. So, but take care for now, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.